Test.
All right. We're going to call to order the City Council meeting for Monday, November 6, 2023. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, for the first time in a long time, roll call. Amanda.
Jeff Felke.
Here.
Tracy Coach. Here. Bill Leclerc.
Here.
Darla Leclerc. Here. Tim Petrie.
Here.
Bonnie Shimonis.
Here.
Scott Steckmesser.
Here.
Adam Husky.
Here. With everyone present, yours is not on? Well, mine's on because I can hear it. There you go. You good?
Okay.
All right. With everyone here, we can skip over number 4 and move right on to number 5, which is input from the public. Anyone wishing to address the council with something that's on this agenda or something they'd like to see on a future agenda, please step up to the podium, my right, your left, and just state your name and address for the record. Input from the public is open. All right, seeing none, we will move on to number 6, which is council communications. Any letters or other communications from citizens that anyone would like to share at this time? Bill?
Just mentioning it, we've had probably a dozen letters for the library to vote for the 8% increase that they were asking, that Jeff was asking.
Yep. I've actually had a couple calls on that as well. Not through the, we'll just throw it in the pile. Yep.
Yep, there's been quite a few that have come through on the submissions here. And then I think there was, as long as we're on that, I think there was another one that sent a submission to all the council in regards to some parking in front of a neighbor's house, or a neighbor parking in front of their house, having difficulty with leaves and such. I would assume that was sent on to chief. If not, we
Not,
can
it will
send
be.
it on. What's that?
If not, it will be. That came in on Friday.
Yeah, I believe so. Did you
Yeah.
get that, chief? The submission? No? Okay,
And
we'll
that
make sure.
does pertain to a situation we have been mindful of in the
It's
past.
ongoing.
Yeah.
I think I have it. I will, I'm gonna try and get that while we're doing this. Anybody else? Council communications? Jeff?
Just that one that you said, and then I got a couple more. Somebody wondered about Spectrum. Any updates on Spectrum yet?
So do we. And actually, I spoke with Rick Powell, our IT supervisor today. He and I did not reconnect, basically checking and threatening to just say, I know it's not what we want, but let's cut this off and refund the money. And I'm not sure, we haven't paid the full amount on that anyway, but what was supposed to be a 6-month project is approaching a year, and we don't see any
Right.
real customer service coming from Spectrum on this. So that's all I have.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
And Greg, I sent this idea to you. Bill and I were talking, and what we were talking about is get our money back from Spectrum, call it a day, use the money that we're saving from that, and start a small hometown newspaper. I know it's not going to help people the evening of our city council meetings, for them to see us in action. But maybe we can get more information out to the public by doing something like that. And Bill and I went to Brilliant, was it Balders, and talked to the people who run their newspaper, and we got a lot of information and ideas. So maybe that's one thing we might want to look at, and maybe start off online. And then if somebody wants paper copies, we can provide that. We can mail it to them, or, but I think it would be very cost effective, and that's just what we had talked about.
Not a bad idea, but I think a lot of the people are trying to get this meeting live. And I
Yes.
think that's kind of the struggle there. And maybe we do move away from Spectrum, and maybe we look to our friends over at CA for broadcasting, and maybe they got a station that they could air our meetings on. Maybe that's an option as well. But Spectrum, it obviously isn't working with them. I just say that because CA for broadcasting is in the audience tonight, which is always nice to have them. But on a serious note, that would be something that could be a possibility, streaming it on them. Go ahead. Yes, of course, but that would be another way to kind of get our meetings out and broadcast out to anyone that kind of wants to listen to it, even abroad, because you can usually listen to their stations in any state. So that might could be an option if they'd be willing to do such a thing, or if that would work. But obviously, Spectrum's not really working with us.
Oh, we have 2 minutes with Two Rivers. We could have 2 hours with Two Rivers.
Yeah.
Typical council meeting.
Hey, why not? So.
And then there was one more, I was contacted by somebody about the signs in the sidewalk that, the realtors had them for about a year, and somebody else wanted to put them in, and all of a sudden it's a no-no.
We're addressing that on the Plan Commission agenda Monday. There was just recently notice sent out to an individual, I think same individual I talked to. Yeah, the realtors went from one sign, one of the realtors, I want to identify, from 1 to 5, I think. We have nothing in our code about placing signage on the public right-of-way on public property. And so if nothing else, it either needs to be allowed by ordinance or it's a violation. And whether we were Johnny on the spot the first time one appeared, I guess I'd acknowledge we weren't. But nonetheless, I'm sorry, you'd kind of think that the public sidewalk that is public right of way, a person would question before placing signage on it. So we're trying to do a little homework as staff before the next plan commission meeting, which is next Monday, to at least queue that up for discussion.
But they did have a point now, because nobody looks up anymore. Everybody's walking and looking down at their phones. So,
No, I wondered too. I was just walking over there the other day and I don't know, it looks like it would be slippery in comparison. So I'm just wondering if that's the case. Because with winter, I mean, it's already going to be slippery. I don't know if that's a big thing.
Some of the literature indicates otherwise, but that's a fair question. And I don't, a quick Google search didn't find a lot of communities that address, surface applied advertising on public sidewalks. Yeah.
Anything
Even
else?
if it were to be allowed, and I'm not sitting here saying we should, then usually there are some rules, like as to the number and all of that. So,
Yeah, we don't definitely need to dress up the whole sidewalk with it. We don't need too many signs.
I know I had one more, but I didn't text it to myself, so I don't remember what it is.
Yeah.
I'll remember it for the next meeting.
That's it?
Yeah.
Bill, you had your hand up? Nope. Okay. Anybody else? Come, Scott.
I do. One gentleman contacted me, same thing about charter. He says we should just get our money back and do something else with the money. Can't disagree. And the other one was about the new park at Nashotah Park. He was there and asked a bunch of people and kids. They all love it. So nice job to the park, Parks and Rec. Nice job with the new playground there. So he says thank you. That's it.
Good stuff to hear. Anybody else? Seeing none, we will go to council reports from boards, commissions, and committees. Anyone have anything they want to report on? I know we just had, a utilities meeting across the room? Or was that public
Yeah,
works?
no, that
Utilities.
was utilities. I don't know, I'm gonna let Tim take that one. I'm
He's
putting
very,
you on the spot. If you want to just give a brief update as to the meeting we just had.
That's your job. Jeff wasn't there.
I forgot. There's the first update. Anything important?
Well, that's still hashing over stuff.
Okay.
Well, the first thing that we talked about was the construction projects, and that's pretty in-depth as to what's going on with that. And that's something that could probably be addressed at a different time to get the information out to you guys, because it would eat up so much time right now. But I'm sure, like with Matt, we could figure out how to get the information out to everybody. Wastewater utility, guess what? The sludge screw press is still kind of sitting there. Yeah, so we'll give an update on that some other time. Electric and telecommunications, we had an update on Columbus substation. Tree trimming notices are going to be going out. It will be the central part of town, which will be in between the two rivers, south of 34th Street. They have a job posting for a line worker. And that one was going to be a apprentice. Is that right? Okay. And then eventually this person would have some education, get him up to journeyman, but he's going to come in as an apprentice. And water utility, the tower painting is complete. I know we did some cursory PFAS testing and we look really, really good. More to come. Stormwater utility, Northeast Lakeshore TMDL is still in process. Hopefully we get one soon so engineering can plan what they want to do. And then for the solid waste, there's going to be a meeting tomorrow with Manitowoc Disposal, which should go pretty good. And that's about all we had. Do you remember anything else we talked about?
Just electrical is waiting on parts.
Is that for the substation?
Everything's parts for all these departments.
Meters, I know, are in shortage too. Meters for the electric department, yeah.
The electrical controls for the screw press for sludge and
Right.
wastewater. It's all supply
Yeah.
chain issues.
I don't know, I figure maybe that'll be ready to go by the time I have some grandkids, which is very unlikely, so
There'll be somewhere you can take them to visit.
Yeah.
the highlight. All right, and then with Main Street, I know Greg is going to talk about a couple of these events that are coming up. Just to let you know that Hamilton Wood Type Museum, they hosted its annual Ways Goose Convention. People had traveled here to from Florida, Virginia, Washington, and it is a world famous meeting of wood type fans. And I'm not sure how many years they've been doing this, but it was very, very successful. And they always like to take a look around town and go to different establishments. And I know, Greg, you're going to talk about this, but the Two Rivers High School Performing Arts very soon is going to be putting on Bye Bye Birdie. The Christmas and holiday decorating is, I know I've talked about that before, but basically it is a Christmas parade of lights, light up downtown. It's going to be very, very beautiful this year. We've really stepped it up a notch. Shop Hometown Saturday is going to be on November 25th. There is a food drive going on, donate food for TREP at City Hall, and that's going to be Friday from 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Oh, donations can also be dropped off at the electric department. Two Rivers Historical Society special winter hours. The Museum and Visitor Center is open noon to 5 p.m. Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays through December 12th. And that is a lot more hours that they're going to be open than they were like last year. So they will be available to people, through winter up until, mid-December, which is nice. And the last thing is Environmental Advisory Board. And we sat down as a board and we reviewed and modified that EAB mission statement and objectives. Just real quick, what we agreed to was to keep the name Environmental Advisory Board, but to update the description. That will go back, that needs to be updated in an ordinance. So we'll have a cursory ordinance, hopefully at the next EAB meeting, which is later in the month. We'll talk about it as a board, and then after that, hopefully get it to everybody here during a work session. I think you'll be happy with what we came up with. Winter Educational Series, we're going strong. On November 2nd, Mike Mathis was kind enough to give his presentation on creating fun and resilient parks. The next one is going to be January 4th, and it's going to talk about invasive species, both flora and fauna. And that's about it. That's all I've got. It was enough. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Scott?
Just one real quick from Public Works. It's my understanding that all the tree leaves had a big meeting and decided to fall basically all at once. So the crews are out. So anyone that's listening, please be patient. Crews are working really hard to get all the leaves picked up. They will be on according to the website, South Side tomorrow. Just so everyone's aware, check out the website if you're wondering when they're going to be stopping by your place to collect leaves.
That's good news because I'm hearing from the south side today. I know Matt is.
Yeah, I had one of those too that I did forward on to Greg that forwarded on to Matt, little chain of command there. But yes, we did hear from some people. This person stated they weren't there in a couple weeks, but nonetheless, yeah, the leaves have fallen.
Yeah,
so
they all came down
it's-
at
It's a
once,
mess.
Be-
But
please
yes,
be
Public
patient.
Works, I think, has 2 crews, correct? So 2 crews that are working on getting those things picked up for you. So, anybody else? See, Jeff.
We're getting close to wrapping up the budget for the year. Thursday, we should probably polish it off, right?
That should be when the final recommendations from Personnel and Finance come out, and then the hearing on November 26, action at the first council meeting in December.
And out of that, it's looking like there's roughly gonna be a 3% wage increase across the board. Electric utilities up 3.74%, water's up 4.14, wastewater about 4%. General government 6.8%, correct me, Greg, if I'm wrong.
Right.
Fire and rescue, right around 4%. Park and rec, 7.8%, is that correct?
Sounds about right, yeah. Mostly driven by proposed increases for part-time and seasonals.
Police was a little better than 8%, is that right, Ben? And library, 8%, and that's mostly in salaries. So, boy, I sure wish everybody would have been able to keep this at 4%, because when I see these 7s and the 8s, I'm probably the largest individual in contributing taxpayer in the city. When you're paying that much in taxes, it hits home. So I would really have liked to seen that shared revenue actually easing the burden for the people rather than padding departments, in my opinion. And that's all I got.
And understand, of course, the lift in spending doesn't necessarily equate to the tax rate, but we'll talk about that. Because for the general fund, there is no property tax rate increase proposed. Not so for debt service and library.
Debt service is also something that's over the last 10 years, not necessarily anything of this particular council, but could be of councils past as well, as that debt comes due. All right, city manager's report's up next, Greg.
Okay, I'm pleased to say we have several invited guests tonight. First up, as we look forward to Veterans Day observances on Saturday, the 11th, and then likewise on Friday, the 10th, going into the weekend, we welcome VFW Post Representative Pamela Stevens. Pam.
Are we on? Yes.
We're on.
Okay, I'm with the American Legion, Post 165, and I am the chairperson for Veterans Day and Memorial Day. And we would like to extend a invitation to all of you board, city council members, excuse me, to the breakfast at the high school at 8:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock. So that will be on Friday, the 10th. And then out to all veterans that are in the city. We have the high school ceremony will begin at 9:30 on Friday. 9:15. We will then move from there, from the high school to Koenig School at 10:15. And then finish it off with McGee School at 1:15. There's no ceremony at Clark because of the construction. Then on Veterans Day, November 11th at 11 o'clock in Central Park, we will be having the honors with the honor guard there. All public is welcome to do the honors. And C. Hafer News, thank you for advertising this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. We have a number of new employees to be introduced today. We're super pleased to have some of them here tonight. First of all, I would like to invite Ben Meinert, our police chief, to come forward and introduce our new police department secretary and evidence clerk. Chief.
Come on up here. So with that being said, I think I'd be remiss not to mention that this opening is because we have Kim Pritzel retiring at the end of the year. Kim had 25 plus years with our department. So as with any employee that goes out after a good 25-year of service, you lose a lot of knowledge. A lot goes out the window. So in order to replace that, we're looking for the best candidate. We did post, and we had, I believe it was 56 total candidates. It's kind of unusual, but being that position that Kim is employed in, she has a lot of responsibilities, including custodian of our evidence, which takes a lot of responsibility. So with the okay, we look to hire somebody on with a short training experience with Kim to gain as much valuable knowledge as possible. That being said, we did have an extensive process, which normally we wouldn't have for just any civilian position. But with the responsibility this one entailed, we felt that it was necessary. So we utilize a lot of our clerical staff, as well as some of our other administrative department heads here, including Amanda, to pick this position. So after going through a couple of interviews and a thorough investigation, we did hire who we believe will be the next best to take over for Kim in that position. And we believe that she's got the responsibility. She's got everything that it takes. She comes to us from Cleveland Police Department, where she's kind of taken part in little parts of every one of our clerical staff's position. And with that, she'll take on Kim's position fully by the beginning of the year. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Rhonda Deere, our newest clerical staff. Oh, I just have her coming back so she doesn't trip her. It's always easier to walk back. Just, yeah. A lot of us.
Hi, I'm Tracy. How do you do? Welcome.
Welcome to
A lot of great things.
Oh, another one from somebody.
And thank you to all the representatives of TRPD, two-legged and four-legged at the back of the room. I figured the dog was here unless one of you has a bit of a rasp. So yeah. Next up, Mike Mathis, our Parks and Recreation Director. We have two new employees over at Parks, but only one here this evening that we're happy to welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, the Parks and Rec departments had an opening for our recreation clerk position. Very important for the department. It's the kind of the face of our organization. It works right at the front desk at the community house, coordinating the registration for programs, booking facilities, helping with marketing, just you name it. This position is core to our team. So we definitely needed to get somebody that was a team player, can step up and lead and do all these great things. So I'm happy to introduce you to Laura Hooper. So Laura spent 20 years working for American Family Insurance. Her last position with them was an office manager and sales specialist. So she started there when she was 16, and we were very lucky to get somebody that with that level of dedication and expertise onto our team. Laura comes to us with a BA in business administration. Works and supports the community a lot here in Two Rivers. Former McGee Elementary PTO member, Creative Learning Center board member as well. Just very impressed with her positivity, the leadership, the reference checks I did for her were absolutely glowing. I don't know, usually those are, but these were exceptionally good. I even had one of her former bosses just come into my office and to expound on how excellent Laura was. So that was all really awesome. Yes, so please welcome Laura. Thanks.
No, not this one. I would mention, and maybe Mike did, because I don't always pay as much attention as I should. AJ Lorigan has been hired as part-time community house receptionist. Some of you may know him from working part-time at the Main Street office as well, downtown, in a visitor information capacity. So we welcome him as part of the team. Yep, and we'll get him to a meeting. So next up, also an invited guest, but with a related action in mind for council. Pleased to welcome Brian Grunwald from Clifton Larson and Allen CPAs to present the 2022 audited financial statements. You'll have copies of the audit report, I think inclusive of the management letter in front of you. Welcome, Brian. And you can
All right.
beep or nod in my direction and we'll advance the
I'll
slides.
give you the finger.
That's been known to happen here too.
I meant pointer. Okay, sounds good. I am Brian Grunewald with Clifton Larson Allen. Thank you for having me here this evening. And before I get started, I do want to acknowledge and thank Dave and the rest of your team for the cooperation and assistance that we receive throughout the audit process. Certainly a lot of effort and time goes into the audit process, and working with our team, answering questions, providing information, and I certainly want to acknowledge your team for that assistance. In terms of the audit documents, as Greg had mentioned, I believe you all have a copy of the audited financial statements. In addition to that, there's also a letter in there, which I will touch on briefly. I'm going to refer to that as a governance communication letter. It's tucked in the back of that bound document. I have a few brief comments on that. And for purposes of tonight's discussion, I took some information from both of those documents and summarized it here in the PowerPoint that you have in front of you. This is intended to be pretty high level. Certainly, if anyone has any questions or any specific topics that you'd like me to talk further about, I'd be more than happy to. So please feel free to ask questions as we go through. And first, I just wanted to start out with a summary of the financial statements and the audit results. The financial statements actually include two different reports. The first I'm going to refer to as the audit opinion. That is considered to be a clean or modified opinion. Essentially means that I believe that your financial statements are complete and accurate and in accordance with our professional standards. And as I say that, please keep in mind that the purpose of the audit is to provide assurance that the financial statements, again, are complete and accurate. And we have done that and issued that clean, unmodified audit opinion. In addition to that, every audit that is conducted in accordance with government auditing standards is also required to consider the organization's internal control structure. Essentially, that means how things are done, how you handle cash, for example, how you pay your bills. All of that falls under the concept of internal control. Included in the report is a finding. You can see listed here as finding 2022-1, preparation of the annual financial report. The purpose of that is to disclose that we, as your auditors, are the ones who prepared the financial statements. That is, I'm going to refer to it as a repeat finding, very common for organizations of your size, really a matter of practicality and efficiency to have us as auditors go through and prepare that, but we are required to disclose that. And as I say that, I do want to keep in mind that as part of the audit process, we do work closely with Dave and your team. If we do identify adjustments, we share that information with Dave. We make sure that we're on the same page, that we agree with the numbers, and we also share a draft of this document before we issue a final. Again, the purpose of all those steps is to ensure that we agree before we issue a final document. Any questions or thoughts on either of those topics?
I was just wondering if you could talk about these leases in note 1. The right to use lease, I'm just not sure if I understand that.
Yeah, okay, so there's, that is one of the topics I was gonna touch on in a minute, so you're getting a little ahead of me, but that's okay. I will say this, throughout both the governance communication letter and in several places throughout your financial statements, there are several references to Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement number 87 that deals with leases. What happened is there was a new standard, so you haven't seen that before. We're required to disclose and quantify information related to leases differently than what you've done in the past. I will say, I know you've got the budget coming up next. From a budgetary perspective, really no change on your budget. If you think of either lease receivables, people paying you, or where you're making payments to others, like your enterprise lease agreements, there's really no change in terms of cash coming in or cash going out. The difference is how we quantify the lease liability, for example, and what we disclose relative to the terms of that agreement. So in both of those scenarios, we look at your agreements, we understand the terms of those.
Are they long-term? If they are, we go through and we add this additional information to your financial statements. Maybe I'll just stop there because I know I said a lot. Would you like me to keep going? Or do you want me to talk about your question further?
Well, I have to ask these questions 20 times before it gets
Yeah.
through.
Yeah,
But I mean, thanks.
okay. Anybody else want me to talk more about leases? Okay, very good. And if we can go to the next slide. Okay, the purpose of this next slide, and as you can see, it's labeled as required communications, is really intended to give you an overview of that letter, that governance letter that's included in your financial statements. If you go through that letter, the topics that are on the slide here are all referenced and discussed within that letter. I would say this, very standardized type topics, because it is information required. A lot of accounting terminology. From my perspective, I would say nothing that's unusual, certainly nothing that's a red flag. I'd say the one thing that's new is what we just talked about. There are multiple references throughout all these documents that talk about that new standard. And again, why did we do that? Because you're required to, in accordance with our professional standards. Any thoughts or questions on that slide or that letter before I move on? Okay, then the next several slides, I realize this is very high level. I just wanted to take a step back and give you a snapshot of some of the financial results. So what I started out doing is the next couple slides, I'm just focusing on fund balance. From a financial condition perspective, you know, when organizations ask us, well, hey, how are we doing? The number one thing that we look at is your fund balance and your fund balance reserves. That's the cumulative reserves that you built up over time. So this first slide is looking at your general and your debt service funds. You can see the total for your general fund at the bottom of that first subtotal. Just presenting what your reserve balances are at the end of each of the last few years. If we focus on the total for the general fund, you can see at the end of 2022, you ended with a total of 2.3 million in fund balance reserves versus 2.5 million for the previous year. How did that happen? It's really the cumulative effect of all of your revenues and all of your expenses for 2022. And those expenses exceeded your revenues by 184,000, bringing your fund balance reserves from 2.5 million down to 2.3 million. From an account, and there is more information in your financial statements. I would suggest you look at page 28 if you want to look at that further. In terms of the categories that are presented there, those are defined again by our professional standards. The category that we tend to pay the most attention to is that unassigned category. That really is dollars that have not been set aside or restricted for any other purpose. Think of dollars that are available for contingency and working capital reserves. And in your case, you can see, I just want to highlight, at the end of the year, you'll see the 138,000 in brackets. That is in a deficit position at the end of 2022. If we carry down at the bottom of the slide there, you'll see the reference to the debt service fund. Again, the purpose of the debt service fund, levy tax, use that to pay principal and interest. At the end of the year, you did have reserves again of a deficit there of 18,271. If we jump ahead to the next slide. Again, just giving you snapshots of the balances of those reserves at the end of the year. This is focusing on your special revenue funds. You can see the list of all the different funds there. Again, at the bottom, you'll see the reference to the total. Total of all of your special revenue funds at the end of 2021, approximately 700,000. At the end of 2022, leaving you with just under 2 million. So you did have some increases there. The highlights, again, a lot of information there. The highlights, I would say, is the change in your business and industrial revolving loan fund. You did have approximately 1.2 million that came in from the sale of the property. I see you nodding your head, so I'm not going to talk about that any further. And then the other item that I wanted to talk briefly about is if you look at the last line there, you'll see the reference to ARPA. And just keep in mind that whenever we talk about ARPA, there are compliance requirements related to the dollars that you've received. So before you spend those, you have to meet eligibility requirements, compliance requirements, there's reporting requirements. You have to do that in order to spend those dollars. So they're not recognized as revenue until you spend them. At the end of the year, you had approximately 850,000 in cash in your ARPA fund. That's available. I know you've got plans for that. The balance that is presented here, the $3,115, that's the interest earnings that you built up during the year. So just wanted to point that out. And slide. Just again, giving you snapshots of your balances here. This is focusing on your capital projects funds. Again, I know you've got a lot of activity here. If you jump down to the total for your capital projects fund, ended the year at 3.9 million versus 3.3 million for the end of the previous year. If you go down the slide and you look at the balances last year versus this year, you can see a little bit of the fluctuation. It's primarily in the first line and the third line, that being the street projects and the park and cemetery. And then if you jump almost down to the bottom, you'll see the references for Central Park. You can see an increase there, 654. And I would say whenever I look at a capital projects fund, I think it's important to remember the purpose and timing, meaning what was the revenue source that you had that you were going to use to pay for that project. Typically that's debt related, but again, heavily influenced by timing of when you issue that debt versus timing of when you spend it. And this is just giving you a snapshot of what's left at the end of 2022. Okay, sounds good. And then just I wanted to touch on a few of the utilities. And here again, just wanted to give you a snapshot of your results for the year. So very, very summarized here. Whenever I look at utilities, I tend to focus on their operating reserve, their operating results. So if you look at the first few lines, operating revenues versus operating expenses, and then that next line there is showing you operating income or loss. Again, just what does it take to provide that service, and what do you have left in terms of your operating income? So in the third line down, you'll see 850,000, slight increases from where you've been in the past, but it's important to remember from that operating income, you also have to do things like pay your interest expense. That's included in the non-operating revenues and expense line. And then you also have capital contributions and transfers out. As a reminder, the transfers out, those are dollars that come out of the utilities back to your general fund. So certainly help them out. And then as a reminder, again, capital contributions, very common for other sources to pay for capital for those utilities. Could be developers, could be customers, could be other funds. We'll talk about ARPA in a second. So just wanted to point that out with regards to capital contributions. Overall, that change in net position, that's the total change in your equity, your net position for your electric utility. Total net position increasing 595,000 for 2022.
Brian, is that number prior to the payout of any principal? And electric doesn't carry a lot of debt, but if there were, you expense interest, but then I know principal payments come later.
Yep. So the accounting treatment for general fund and debt service fund is a little bit different than what we have to do for utility. I want to bore you with details, but for an electric utility or any utility, you're required what they call full accrual accounting. So we only present the interest expense here, but that's why it's so important when you go through your rates and your rate structure to make sure that your operating income is high enough that you generate enough cash to make those principal payments.
Just wanted folks to think we're not growing the fund balance by over $500,000 a year in the electric utility. Wish we were, but paying off debt is important.
Exactly.
Or capital expenditures.
Yeah. I would say it's accounting treatment, and it's what I'm presenting on the slide here. And I'm just looking at your net position.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Then similar information for the water utility. Again, really like to focus on that operating income. You can see 2022 operating revenues versus expenses of 654. Again, from that, we have that non-operating revenues and expense line there too. That's only going to include that interest component. And then again, as you move down, you'll see capital contributions, 313,000, transfers in, transfers out. That again, 166,000 in a brackets means transfer out. And here I do want to point out that your capital contributions, that again includes amounts paid for by other sources. So out of that 313, 302,000 of it came from ARPA. And again, leaving you with change in net position of 946,000. Utility, again, similar format, similar information. Again, focusing on your operating results, operating income of 456,000. If we work again down the slide, you'll see capital contributions of 179,000. Do want to point out that based on your agreement with Michigat, out of that 179,000, 175 is from that Michigat agreement. And then again, you've got the transfer out, money coming back to your general fund, leaving you with change in net position of 353,000. And that's the last slide that I had to prepare for utilities. But I just want to maybe circle back and reiterate, whenever I talk to anybody about utilities, just keep in mind that this is really only focusing on your operating results. I really think the key when you think of utilities right now with what's happened between inflation, and I heard you talking about capital projects before, inflation in general for operating costs, plus the impact of inflation on the cost of capital projects has really made it challenging for places like utilities to be able to pay for that continued reinvestment in the infrastructure that you have to be able to, that you need to provide that service. Staying on top of your cost estimates for what you need to do and when you need to do it is extremely important. And then figuring out how to pay for that and build that into your rate structure, again, extremely, extremely important. That's not really presented or the purpose of what we have on the slides here today. But I know you guys are working on that and follow that closely. So just wanted to point that out or mention that. So you're not alone in the challenges with how do you pay for capital.
And obviously, higher interest rates factor in a big way with
Exactly.
capital expenditures.
Exactly, exactly. Okay,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead.
there was something on page 15, now I can't find it exactly, about paying bond rates or bond debt from the stormwater. What does that mean? It's on page 15, I think. But I don't see stormwater now. Oh,
Turn that to you.
oh, it's on page 16.
Top of page 16. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Utility is responsible.
Are you just looking at that first sentence there, the first
Yeah.
two sentences?
Well, more or less, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, that is really just disclosing, I think, the original amount of the debt that you took out and then trying to explain in a narrative format what it was used for. So that debt proceeds were used to pay for some infrastructure projects.
If I couldn't, this is just for color commentary, not part of the official report, but the outstanding debt of the stormwater utility would consist primarily of clean water fund borrowings that were done for things like the stormwater ponds the city installed back in 2009 or 2010. Generally, that was at a subsidized interest rate, which is very favorable on clean water fund borrowings. And there was some principal forgiveness on those projects, but there still is debt outstanding from those 4 stormwater pond projects. And in addition to that, there was a state trust fund borrowing, and that was for the shoreline erosion protection in 2020. That's when the lake was at or above record highs, and that fund was tapped for placement of some of the large stone and riprap that was put along the lake shore near the water and wastewater plant and public works facility, primarily there, but in a few other places to protect those assets of the city. So those would be the major borrowings making up that outstanding balance.
And just to elaborate on that, the amount of debt information that's included in your footnotes is pretty extensive. There is a table on page 69 that for your revenue bonds, it does present the different issues, the issue date, the maturity date, as well as the interest rate. So to Greg's point, obviously interest rates have risen, so the older interest rates there do look very favorable in terms of comparison to today's rates. Okay. And then just in closing, just wanted to comment briefly in terms of the audit process, things that are high on our radar. You know, certainly when you talk about ARPA, I know I talked about compliance earlier. Certainly that's something that we pay a lot of attention to. We talk a lot about in terms of compliance and compliance requirements. And then also new accounting and auditing standards. I did reference that lease standard. That was GASB statement number 87. That was required to be implemented this year. GASB is actually out to statement number 101. I did just list one of the standards on here. It's GASB statement number 96. That is one that will be required to be implemented for this year. So the point being there is a lot of new requirements in terms of regulations and things that we need to follow and pay attention to. And then also another reference to statement on auditing standards there too. So we'll make sure that you continue to properly implement standards as you're required to. And that's all that I had prepared, but if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to talk about anything.
Just in general for the viewers, can you just kind of briefly just say how things looked in 2022 overall? Things were balanced, on track, so to speak, in that the city, obviously, we know we paid our bills, but how did it look budget wise?
Yeah, I mean, I would, to highlight that, I would say, obviously, a lot of attention and effort goes into the budget process. That's extremely important. I will say that when I think of 2022, 2023, again, what I said earlier about challenges, you're not alone in that. Everyone is extremely, extremely challenged when you think of things like inflation and what to do with the budget. And I know you talked earlier about raise percentages, for example, and the shared revenue impact. Lots of challenges. I think you guys put in a lot of effort. I think continuing to do that is extremely important. And I would also take it to that next step, like I talked before. Make sure you're tying in that capital and how you pay for things. I think you guys put a lot of effort in that budget process, and I think it's working for you, meaning your results are consistent with that budget. And I think that's critical in today's environment. So keep doing what you're doing. I mean, are things tight? Yeah, I'd say things are tight, but they're tighter everywhere than what I think they'd like them to be.
I have a question.
Yeah.
ARPA money, it's nice. It's been spread around very nicely. It's gonna run out. When do we expect it to that's it?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. You've received 2 allocations each of the last couple of years. Again, I talked about the cash balance on that earlier. I know you've got a plan for those dollars. We've talked about that. I think it's important to understand how much you have, what you're gonna spend that on, and what you're gonna do after that, because exactly it is only so much. So, and I'd say you feel very fortunate that you've received it. It's provided a lot of organizations with an influx of cash reserves.
And of course, it has been devoted primarily to lateral abatement here. I expect you had a little discussion at the Utilities Committee today, and there will be more as to what is the path forward, especially on the private side of the laterals, where we have not been spending ARPA money, but it appears with proper documentation, like everything, especially when it comes to the ARPA money, that is feasible. And that's something we're going to need a serious discussion of in the very near future. Again, because we didn't fare as well on principal forgiveness on the state safe drinking water funding for private laterals this year as we historically have. That was a disappointment. So we'll be looking at shifting some gears there to keep that program going forward, and making darn sure we not only spend the ARPA money allocated to the city, but the money very generously being shared by Manitowoc County. We don't want to let them down on spending the money they've allocated either. So there are some relevant deadlines coming up in 2024 to at least get those dollars. Encumbred's not the right word, but a word something like that, committed.
Sounds good.
Thank
you very much. And if any other questions do come up at a future date, certainly work through Greg and Dave. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that come
I
up.
think in your outreach to the council president, and you guys typically do that, obviously, to communicate directly with the elective body, there was at least one policy recommendation.
Yes, you had talked about fraud and a process of which, not to alert anyone, there's no fraud that we know of going on here, but by no means. But kind of a whistleblower approach to kind of tackling that, and maybe having some kind of a policy in place for that.
Maybe I'm just going to step back a little bit. So as part of the audit process, again, we talked to a lot of different people throughout the organization. We have some standard audit questions and things that we work through. As part of that, I did reach out to Adam. Again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not aware of any fraud, so standard communication there.
Yes,
and as part of that, there's some things that have come up where organizations have talked about, well, let's make sure that if someone within the organization is aware of something, that they have an outlet to do that, a way to communicate that, where maybe they don't feel like there could be some repercussions for doing that, for example. So yeah, we did talk about, I'll refer to it as a whistleblower policy. We talked about the topic. If you'd like me to send over additional information or examples, we certainly can do that. Certainly if you Google, whistleblower policy or conflict of interest policy, certainly those topics could come up and give you some examples on what to do there.
I think it would be a good idea to at least look at and see if that's something that we can implement. I don't think it would be a bad thing, because if it's happening, we want to know about it, obviously, and we want everyone to feel safe and secure about having some kind of policy in which to do that they feel safe as well.
Assume we put that under the heading of best practices and
exactly
something that should be looked at.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And thanks for bringing that up.
Sounds good. Any other thoughts? All right.
Otherwise, we'd ask the council consider a motion to receive and place on file the 2022 audited financial statements and report.
Seconded by Bill. Thank you very much. Council discussion. Seeing none, we'll send this to roll call. Amanda.
Scott Steckmeister,
Aye.
Adam Huskey.
Aye.
Jeff Delkey. Tracy Coach. Bill Leclerc,
Aye.
Darla Leclerc,
Aye.
Tim Petrie, Donnie Shamalinas.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Onward with your report, Greg.
Provided from over the Sandy Bay subdivision, looking west to the East Twin River and Highway 42. So beautiful shot there. He's very nice, done a nice job of providing these on a voluntary basis to the city. Staffing updates, because we're a people business, as you know. Over 85% of the general fund budget, as we reviewed that, is personnel costs. We have ongoing recruitments, including identification of a top candidate for building inspector. It does look like our current part-time inspector, Jane Drager, will be continuing to work with us at least till the end of the year and able to help with some orientation, familiarization. And as was mentioned earlier, we just today, the postings went out for an apprentice line worker position, that vacancy on the line crew at the electric utility due to a pending retirement by the end of this year. So important that we keep that crew up to speed. You met tonight Rhonda Deere, the police secretary and evidence custodian, obviously somebody bringing a wealth of experience to that position. You met Laura Hooper, the part-time recreation clerk, again, bringing some great business experience, a lot of knowledge to the community, to the position. And you will welcome at a future meeting. You might run into him before that over at the community house, our new part-time receptionist at the community house, AJ Lorigan. So good things going on there. A lot of good work behind the scenes by our city clerk, personnel director, and by the various departments. Leaf collections going on. Mother Nature always throws us curves. That plunge from not having had a frost to about a 21-degree night did some amazing things. So follow updates on City Hall Facebook or the city's website. Be patient as well. The crews are out there doing the best they can. But again, reach out and let us know, whether it's your council member, the city manager's office, or public works office. Just a report. I promised this, and I realized the other day I'd gotten the information from the utility and didn't share it particularly timely. But this was offered in the spring of this year, offering both city tree planting fund and electric utility commitment to community funds to encourage more plantings on private property. There were a total of 18 folks that submitted for pre-approval, basically, to know whether they have approval and could go forward and buy trees and have a reasonable expectation they'd get a reimbursement. 18 of those were 12 folks that actually participated in the program. There were total rebates of just over $2,400, funded 50-50 by the tree planting fund and the Two Rivers Utilities Fund. So certainly we'll talk about this early in the new year, but this is a program we may very well want to continue and expand on in the coming year. Good response. And thanks to Gina down at the utilities for handling all the applications. And if council approves, I think applications are ready to go for next year as well. The Two Rivers Utilities annual food drive is all of this week. Go down to the utility office on Lake Street or here at customer service at City Hall and donate 3 non-perishable food items and get a free string of LED Christmas lights, a floodlight, or a light bulb. You must be a Two Rivers Utilities customer. And I'm sorry, I may have misstated. Brian, drop-off is down at the utility office or customer service. Okay. Again, serving the community. We know there's a lot of needs out there. So upcoming events, Washington House is extending its season. The museum and visitor center at Washington House are open noon to 5 Fridays through Sundays through December 16. They have a raffle going on apparently right now with prizes as noted there, that in the interest of fundraising for the Historical Society, you can get yourself a new John Deere riding mower, or dinner for four at the Lighthouse Inn, or $300 in cold hard cash. Stop over to the Historical Society at the Washington House, look into that. They also are offering, as a service to the community and as a fundraiser, rental of the second floor grand ballroom, which capacity is probably about 100 people. $35 an hour, $170 per day, a new unique historic venue that people can tap into for their holiday parties or other events. Hamilton Wood Type, in addition to having hosted another successful Ways Goose Printers Conference, and I heard from one business today that had about 200 people show up at 10:30 on Saturday night. So you wish you had more bartenders when that happened, but very positive. And then upcoming, as publicized here, the Creepy Crawly Typey Letterpress event, November 17 to 18, a letterpress and animation workshop using the Hamilton collection of wood type and ornaments to make letter bugs. Be watching out for those letter bugs. They'll eat your wood type. Community Thanksgiving meal over at the Two Rivers Senior Center. Again, looking for volunteers to assist with serving this community Thanksgiving meal on Thanksgiving Day, November 23rd. Call or email Heather Eilenfeld, our Senior Center Director, if you're interested in helping out. And thank you to NextEra Energy, the Point Beach Nuclear Plant, for their $2,000 donation in support of this year's community Thanksgiving meal. Darla mentioned earlier, Saturday, November 25th, Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, nationally is Shop Small Saturday. Hometown Two Rivers headquarters at the Main Street office, 1608 Washington Street. First 200 folks to stop by there get a Shop Hometown Two Rivers goodie bag. Some of the bags will contain Cool City cash that can be spent at downtown businesses. And you can also register for a drawing for more Cool City cash. We appreciate the sponsorship by Shoreline Credit Union, your hometown credit union, and also their sponsorship for the parade. So, you know, in this age when so much shopping is online and the big box stores are cutting back on their brick and mortar commitments, those small businesses that line our Main Street and other locations in the downtown are so important. And we know how much they give in support of community activities, little league teams, different causes, you name it. Good luck getting that from Amazon. So we urge people, not only that, there's the whole social experience. Get out from behind your keyboard and actually engage with people while you do shopping. So want to encourage that. Of course, the Hometown Holiday Parade of Lights is also on Saturday evening of Thanksgiving weekend. Parade starts at 5:30 just north of 22nd Street, goes down Washington to 16th Street. Santa will be there. There's competition for trophies. The Parade of Lights theme is a new theme this year, and there's awards for best use of lights, best band, and judge's choice. Contact the Two Rivers Main Street office to register for that. I know that we have some lights on order now to embellish the appearance of Central Park, and if the shipping gods are with us, those we hope to have in time for the parade. And Lisa Keen, my assistant, wanted to be sure that we share this historic photo, this balloon float from the Two Rivers Balloon Parade in 1951. We think, given the attire of the guy walking with it, this probably was the holiday parade, the Christmas parade. And do take note of how deep the folks were lined up in the background in front of what was the old Montgomery Ward store on Washington Street. So rekindling that spirit. Speaking of rekindling spirit, there's a fair amount of time between between November 23rd and December 25th. So this year, through the efforts of Lisa Keen and our office, the Parks and Rec Department, which has a new outdoor skating rink that they'll soon be opening, Rotary Club of Two Rivers, Washington House, Two Rivers Main Street, and the Friends of the Senior Center, we're cooperating to present a Cool City Christmas, noon to 6 p.m. on December 16. There'll be ice skating on the synthetic ice rink at Central Park West. Holiday craft making over at Washington House, obviously downtown shopping and dining. We will have Santa, his elves, and 2 honest to goodness live reindeer pictured there. There'll be a picture opportunity. There'll be s'mores on open fires in the Central Park area. That's the day of the candy cane hunt in Two Rivers and Manitowoc, sponsored by our rec departments. vendor fair in the community house gym. We're still looking for more local vendors to fill that out, but as of today, we have we're at 13 paid vendors with room for 30, and the calls and interest coming in there. There will be hot chocolate and concessions. I think that's where the Friends of the Senior Center come in. Carolers, including the high school chorus, singing holiday music at various locations in the downtown. I think Washington House, Schrader's, and outside of the community house, weather permitting. Otherwise, those reindeer and Santa and the elves will join the vendor fair inside. But this being Two Rivers, it's got to be pretty bad for them to do that. So this, we hope, is the start of yet another pre-Christmas event that can bring people downtown. And kudos to everybody that's stepped up.
I just want to say that the businesses downtown, we're getting in touch with them to let them know that this is a perfect opportunity for them to extend their open hours, and to maybe they can kind of draft on this so that they have more exposure and promotion, and have like maybe some little goodie bags or coupons for the residents so that they come into the establishments. And I gotta say that that Lisa Keen has done an outstanding job with this. I was blown away when I first learned about this. And Main Street is definitely involved, but I think she's done a tremendous job with this. So thank you to her.
And kudos as well to Tootsie and the folks at Washington House who've really stepped up for this. Lots of opportunities to buy Two Rivers branded merchandise at various locations downtown also. And oh my goodness, that is my report for this evening. Although also under City Manager's report, there is information in your packets, a proposed resolution regarding legislation that's been introduced by a couple of Oshkosh area representatives, one in the Senate, one in the Assembly, that proposes to make local stormwater utilities subject to full regulation by the State Public Service Commission. As you know, our water and electric rates and a lot of our operating rules or tariffs are governed by the Public Service Commission. Wastewater is not. However, any utility is always subject to a ratepayer petitioning the Public Service Commission for oversight. However, this legislation would take locally created stormwater utilities that were created pursuant to state statute. And I can say in Two Rivers case to do two things: to address the requirements of our MS4 permit, which about 10 years ago was a new thing. Cities having to get discharge permits to discharge stormwater to surface waterways, which we've been doing for years. So it's important to have a funding tool to help pay for those stormwater ponds and other initiatives. It's also just good management of our infrastructure to have a dedicated funding source for stormwater, just like for years we had them for sanitary sewer, water, electric, and what have you. Just like you often hear a hue and cry from business that they aren't necessarily looking for more regulation, it's staff's opinion, and we hope the council will share that opinion, that you can do just fine. We have competent staff locally. You have oversight as a legislative body on how these funds are spent, on what rates are established, and we would urge council to join with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities and a good number of our brother and sister communities in opposing this legislation. The state government's got better things to do, and we've got a lot better things to do than be encumbered with additional regulation. I know Matt has gotten some information from NUSC, the Northeast Wisconsin Area Stormwater Coalition. If you have any further questions for him, but they're just pretty much getting the word out to communities and who the contact should be. I honestly would say the league, whose job is to stay on top of legislative developments involving cities across the state, is really who we're taking our lead from on this. So
I have one quick
in your
question.
packets.
Did we ever find out what prompted these legislators to go forward with this?
Want to speak to what you heard recently on that, Matt?
The short answer is yes. I participated in a webinar session of the American Public Works Water Utility Committee about a week and a half ago, and the Director of Public Works from the city of Oshkosh basically identified that they are the cause of this legislation. The long story short, my understanding is the Chamber of Commerce in the Oshkosh area deeply opposed the creation and functionality of the Oshkosh Stormwater Utility, and basically has made it his mission to dissolve it or highly regulate it.
The stormwater, I'm sorry, I didn't know if you had a comment, but I thought the stormwater thing was sort of influenced by DNR. I mean, this doesn't make sense what you're saying.
The stormwater regulations have actually were initiated through the Clean Water Act of the EPA, which was then relegated down to the DNR, and which has been pushed down to local municipalities to implement these stormwater requirements. It's an unfunded mandate, so these stormwater utilities are the mechanism that are utilized to fund the modifications or improvements necessary to improve the water quality being discharged out to waters of the US and waters of the state.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but why does the Chamber of Commerce, what's their problem?
They basically don't want
Oh, they don't,
want their businesses being
okay.
or funding this. They actually
Well-
would much rather it being funded by residential properties and not the businesses.
Yeah, but the businesses are the ones who cover the ground more than anybody else. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
You
be
are
wasting
totally
time,
correct,
but
Bonnie.
this is sort of nonsense. You wouldn't know everything anyway.
Again, the mission of this individual is trying to push regulations down onto municipalities to be governed, have oversight, state oversight, even more than the oversight that you presently do. So
Also, does the PSC also in their oversight, don't they take a portion of that for their duties? So if they took that over, we'd be paying a portion of our stormwater to the PSC, in fact, hurting our stormwater utility. Because we'd be paying for something for them to oversight on something that we as a body already oversight, costing us taxpayers even more money. So it's certainly something that we should look to object to here as a council.
We've run into situations, there's typically, in the regulated utilities, PSC approval required for certain capital projects that represent major investments, that at times, that requirement has delayed our ability to implement projects, move forward with them. I would point out, as the resolution does, that the city has had a stormwater utility since 2014. The rate for that utility remains, it's $5.75 a month or $69 per year. This council has not gone, staff hasn't recommended, and this council likewise hasn't gone hog wild with, levying this fee and then raising it. It's been invested prudently. And frankly, things don't necessarily get any better when regulation flows from the state capital or the US capital. I think we could all agree on that regardless of our politics.
And if I'm correct, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities is definitely against
They're
this. Is it?
opposed. Yep.
Okay. And then also, do you have any idea when municipalities can start doing some testifying?
Right now, my understanding is both pieces of legislation are in committee, but no action has been taken on either one. So I believe the recommendation is that we send communication to our appropriate representation, encouraging vote it down or kill it before it goes anywhere.
All right, looking for a motion to waive reading and adopt the resolution.
I'll make, go ahead.
Thank you,
No, you can,
Tracy.
Bonnie.
Bonnie, was that you seconding? Were you seconding with your hand? It kind of went something like that. All right. All right, so Tracy seconded by Bonnie. Council discussion. I'm seeing none. What did I say we're gonna do on this one? Roll call vote. Amanda.
Tracy Coach,
Aye.
Bill Leclerc. Darla Leclerc,
Aye.
Tim Petrie. Bonnie Shamunis,
Aye.
Scott Steckmeister. Adam Mahusky,
Aye.
Jeff Delkey.
Aye.
Greg, did you want to go back to C in your report, an overview of the proposed budget?
Yes, I was making such good time. I got all excited and went right past that overview. Also on that
That's why
resolution.
you're running good on time.
Yeah, that resolution you just passed, I would note, we will find out what committee or committees that's in front of. And in addition to Senator Jacques and Representative Sortwell and the governor's office, we'll get that out to the membership on those committees as well. As you know, it matters when you hear from constituents. So, yeah, just a quick summary. Notice is going out very shortly for the public hearing on the 2024 city budget. As I mentioned, that's at the meeting on the 28th. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting now what the word.
27.
27th, thank you, Tracy. Of November, with action to follow by council and at the first meeting in December. First off, just wanted to talk a little bit about the budget. We have 4 property tax supported funds, or funds that are at least funded in part with property taxes. The biggest one is our general fund. The general fund budget includes police, fire, ambulance, public works, parks and rec, and the various administrative or general government departments of the city. Total proposed budget for next year is just over $12.2 million. It is balanced with a net budgeted contingency of just under $90,000. Revenues and expenditures are each up 6.93%. The budget as presented is a balanced budget. No property increase is required for general fund operations as budgeted. At least this year, we can say thank you for that to the legislature for increasing shared revenues, which are up by $848,105, about 19.5%. We have the pledge with the legislation that the state passed earlier this year, that every 2 years when they develop the budget, that those local aids will be tagged at 1% of sales tax proceeds. So generally, even in recession years, that pot grows. And this comes after nearly 30 years of either cuts or freezes in shared revenues. Also, and this isn't anything new with this year's budget so much as a change in how our numbers work in the funding formula. Road aids, major and local streets, or major and connecting streets, those aids are up by about $38,500 for next year's budget. That's in part because of what historic local spending has been on street maintenance and street construction activities. So you are rewarded to the extent you're reinvesting in that infrastructure. This follows 2 years where our road aids have gone down. Jeff mentioned earlier, but major factors in expenditure growth, not only in this budget, but in the various utility budgets where a lot of our employees' wages and benefits are based. The negotiated wage increases with our police and fire unions, those were multi-year contracts negotiated last year and in effect for 2023, 24, 25. A 15% in employee health insurance premiums, slight increases in the employer contribution rates for Wisconsin retirement. And just like you've been hearing out in the small business sector, prices have really gone up for property and liability insurance for the city's various operations. The budget as proposed to Personnel and Finance and then City Council proposes 2 new positions, one of Public Works maintenance worker. The $85,000 or so cost of that position would be covered by eliminating funding for part-time seasonal staff, which we weren't able to find last year to do the work. So it's a net lift of about $42,000 to fund an additional full-time Public Works maintenance worker, and that in a department that over the years has seen pretty significant staffing reductions. That's 82.5% in the general fund. I think the balance is mostly in the stormwater utility. Matt's confirming that. There is provision for adding one full-time GIS position to help better manage the city's mapping and infrastructure information. As currently proposed, that's proposed to be 20% general fund, 20% economic development, and then 20% each to the water, wastewater, and stormwater utilities. We have had extensive discussion of that at committee. Personnel and Finance met jointly with the Utilities Committee last week. The vote out of Personnel and Finance Committee's 3 members was in favor of the various utility budgets in each case as presented, and not opposing a GIS position. However, a majority of the Personnel and Finance Committee did express opposition to pulling those shares out of the utilities, concerned about rate impact. I think that's a fair statement, and that'll get more discussion, I expect, at full council level. But it's a fair debate to be had. The budget continues to fund the one additional that's a typo there, firefighter paramedic position that was authorized by City Council over the course of 2023. That is providing one rotating sort of relief position that can assist when there are extended absences due to FMLA or an injury or something like that, or a vacancy. The budget as proposed also does in the Parks and Rec area, as we mentioned earlier, provide for a substantial increase in funding on the order of $55,000 for Parks and Rec part-time and seasonal help with seasonal special events and park maintenance, cemetery maintenance. Those part-time and seasonal positions are vital to Parks and Rec's mission, and you can't be effectively recruiting with $10 an hour positions when fast food is offering 15. So this is intended to help with that situation. Not the full amount Mike Mathis asked for, but a good 2/3 of it. I think an important down payment. The other major tax supported funds include debt service, which is for principal and interest payments on city general obligation debt related to capital projects. Obviously, as Council President mentioned earlier, what we're dealing with now is paying for debt issued in prior years for capital projects. Some of it's still kicking around in our capital funds, as the auditors reported. Total debt service payments required will increase by about $181,000 next year, from 2.8 million to 2.984 million. Property taxes won't be required to pick up all of that, happily. The lift in property taxes proposed to fund debt service will be $70,000. The balance, remember, there are transfers into debt service from other funds, notably the various TIF districts that have responsibility for repaying debt for capital projects in and around the TIDs. And happily, the debt service fund collects cash when property taxes are paid. Debt service is paid over the course of the year. And so there is some interest earnings on the float, if you will. That's taken into account, and with increased interest rates, which are going to hit us on the cost side for new debt issues, but we likewise are seeing some interest earnings again as an offset on the revenues for that fund. So identifying the need for about a $70,000 lift in property taxes and supported debt service. The third property tax supported fund is the library. The Leicester Public Library annual budget for next year, as adopted by the library board, is $962,879. That's up about $70,000, or just under 8% over 2023. Again, the bulk of this proposed increase is for staff salary adjustments to aid in recruiting and retaining qualified staff. Along the way, I should mention county operating assistance, which is significant for the library, is going to be up by about 9.5%, from $175,000 to $192,000. But to balance that overall library budget with that $70,000 lift, the city tax levy in support of library operations, the request from the director and library board, supported by the city manager, is to increase the city tax support for the library by $50,503, or 8%. That's the 8% Jeff referenced earlier. So that's the lift that would result there from about 631,000 to 681,000. If those two increases in property taxes for debt service and library are approved, and those haven't been voted on as yet by personnel and finance, let alone the full council. Whoops, where did I go with that? That would mean about a 2.5% increase in the overall city share of the property tax bill. And I know we'll have more discussion on that, certainly, council. Nobody likes to hear about tax increases. We're dealing with the same reality households and businesses are when it comes to costs. And I think our staff's done a good job, but we don't have any Houdinis on staff. So that would be subject to more discussion. Capital projects, recognizing that we face a more daunting environment because of costs and interest rates, still trying to make critical reinvestments in the city. A big capital project that's been planned for a few years now is reconstruction of Roosevelt Avenue from 6th Street to 12th Street. This budget anticipates doing that. That's about $5.2 million with all utilities. It would be both general obligation borrowing for the street work, but a more significant investment per usual in what's underneath the street with new water and sewer mains and services, storm sewer. So we'll be discussing that more, but that is in the proposed budget, as is the asphalt resurfacing of a couple of street segments down here near the old Eggers site, 18th, East River Street, 18th to 19th, and 19th from East River to Jefferson. Those are proposed as asphalt overlays to be repaid from the TIF district that is tied into the Confluence proposed development. There are planned bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements to the Washington Street Bridge in advance of the 2025 WISDOT resurfacing program for not only the bridge, but all of Memorial Drive. We've discussed that at a recent council work session. That would be paid for ultimately through tax incremental district number 12, the hotel TIF, which is doing pretty well. Council generally has indicated support for that. There would be continued investment in park improvements to the tune of, from city sources, about $305,000. That would include moving forward with more improvements at Neshota Park related to park master plan implementation, an irrigation system for Central Park West, improvements to park furnishings and possibly play equipment at Washington Park. That is an opportunity to still use the old high school TID to pay off that debt. We'll have to take a close look at that. There's various police department capital equipment at $175,500. The biggest part of that is 2 replacement squads, about $60,000 a piece. I'm sorry, I skipped over phase 2 of the ambulance box refurbishing and mounting on a new cab chassis over at Fire. This is a good example of good stewardship of taxpayer resources. About $65,000 in grant funds secured by the department have paid for the new cab chassis. The city share on this local taxpayer share would be $135,000, and that's for mounting and reconditioning that ambulance box. You might remember that was a used unit purchased from a Dane County area, Fitrona ambulance service, and that's worked out very, very well. Okay, and as I mentioned, we do have projects where debt will be repaid, not from the general property tax base, but with revenue from TIF districts. And this is subject to seeing pending private development projects move ahead next year. Extension of Browns Drive out at the industrial park, about $200,000. We hope to be able very shortly to announce a new business investment out there. We've had closed session discussion of that with the council. Improvements to the seawall and reconstruction of the public river walk in tandem with the West River Lofts project. Revised agreements related to that project are on the council's agenda for tonight. And then if all goes forward with the Confluence project on the East Twin River down here, and I expect we'll have an update from the developers there at the next council meeting on the 20th. There is provision in that TIF for funding an upfront grant to the developer at $900,000. So those last 3 borrowings, pretty major, but they would go forward only if planned private development projects move forward. And in those instances, we're quite confident due to projected cash flows and developer agreements, especially on the latter 2, that would be the increment available to pay that bill. Real quick summary on the utilities, because they make up a lot of our budget. The electric utility is a $9.5 million proposed budget. That operating budget is actually down 2.66% from last year because happily we have not seen the kind of purchase power adjustments that were necessary in 2022. You remember that year when 2 coal plants that are part of our energy mix were out of service. So we're coming back down to what we hope will be more normal levels. There is no rate change proposed in the electric utility. There is in that budget a proposed extraordinary above the 3% base wage adjustment, and that's intended to keep line crew wages competitive with their peers and other notably municipal utilities, and to retain employees. We had fairly extensive discussion of that last week at the joint meeting of Finance and Utilities. I expect that'll continue when the budget comes to the full council. Water utility, about a $2.9 million budget. The operating budget as put forward and now endorsed by the committees is up 4.14% from the current year, no rate change proposed. Wastewater or sewer utility, right in that same neighborhood of $2.9 million. Proposed operating expenses up 4.63% from 2023. There is a 4% rate increase proposed, both to keep up on operating expenses and debt service on major capital projects, things like the screw press that was mentioned earlier and other plant upgrades. Stormwater utility, that's about a $616,000 operating budget, up significantly from 2023, $212,000 increase. Why? Well, half of that is the proposal that was discussed last week with Finance and Utilities Committee to transfer street sweeping funding over to this utility from the solid waste utility. Solid waste utilities feeling some financial pressures. Frankly, most cities that charge a utility for street sweeping are doing it in stormwater because it helps with compliance and reducing suspended solids. So that would account for $106,000 of that lift in solid waste utility spending. I'm sorry, in stormwater utility spending. And also in the 2023 budget is a proposed $90,000 study and report to update the city's stormwater modeling and help assess where we go from here for compliance, especially as those total daily maximum load figures or TMDLs come forward from DNR. So that's a $90,000 expense, something we would only do probably once every 10 years, funded, and 50% of the funding for that is coming in from grant monies. So nearly half of that lift is that one-time study or very infrequently conducted study. Over in the solid waste utility, it's only down slightly, even with the proposal to move street sweeping out. Part of that is because we are seeing increased landfill fees. We've seen increased volumes in recent years, and we're headed into a negotiation with our current solid waste collection contractor, Manitowoc Disposal. And final action on the revenue issue here may very well wait until action is taken on that contract. But right now, there's been the need has been identified for a revenue increase. Staff went to Finance and Utilities Committees talking about an increase in the monthly environmental fee, maybe an increase in the garbage sticker. The clear preference we heard from the committee members at that meeting last week was to pursue an increase by increasing the garbage sticker charge from $2.50 to $3. I don't think we've done that since, I'm forgetting the year. Thank you. Same thing I was remembering, 2009. So it has been a while since that was adjusted. And I just note at the bottom, and I think I touched on this earlier, the current proposed budgets for water, sewer, and stormwater each have about $22,500 for each of them to pick up 20% of the cost of a new GIS position. What we heard from both personnel and finance and at least one of the 2 members of utilities that were there last week was generally support or the understanding of the need for the GIS position, but concern about charging any portion of it to the utilities. So that's a discussion that I expect to continue at full council.
For the record, I'm not in support of it, so.
I think the minutes reflect that. Yeah. That's all I had for now, and we'll be we'll be posting this maybe with a few charts out on our website as well.
Yes, Tracy.
Are we allowed to ask a
Sure,
question?
go ahead to Greg.
Quick
Yeah.
question on the property insurance.
Yep.
How much has that gone up?
Off the top of my head, Dave, you care to speak to that?
15%
It's in the neighborhood of 15%. Yep.
provides the coverage?
Liberty Mutual is our primary carrier.
Liberty-
There's some
Liberty.
specialty lines that other companies carry. And I know we've heard now at a couple TRBA meetings from, Pam Wargen, notably as a local agent, a lot of small businesses are running into the same problem. Insurers getting a lot more risk averse.
Yeah. They've pulled out of whole states, some of these.
And on our fleet
carriers.
coverage, of course, again, it's the cost of parts and the cost of repairing collision damage and other things that have gone sky high. Yeah. I'm not sure the insurance
Curiosity.
companies' investment portfolios are doing quite as well as they used to in things like downtown commercial real estate in big cities. And they've been slapped a little on that front as well. Yep. Thank you. More to come, but that was just meant to be a quick overview.
All right,
Okay.
on to the consent agenda. Under a presentation of minutes, we have one. It is a city council meeting of October 16th, 2023. The recommended action is a motion to waive reading and adopt the minutes. Under B, minutes of meetings, there are 4. The recommended action is a motion to receive and file. Under C, summary of verified bills for the month of October for $1,825,702.83. The recommended action is a motion to receive and file. And finally, under D, set a public hearing on the proposed 2023 city budget. Recommended action, motion to set public hearing for November 27th, 2023 at 6 p.m. The recommended action for the consent agenda as a whole is a motion to approve the consent agenda with the various actions recommended. Looking for a motion on that.
Make that motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Seconded by Darla. Council discussion. See none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Then on to 10 city council formal items, and we got plenty of those. Under A, we have amending ordinance 9-8-8, separation of adult entertainment businesses. Recommended action is a motion to waive reading and adopt the ordinance. I think this relates back to the map that we had at 500 to 700 to 1,000 and not knowing how many businesses that was going to affect. Chief is up at the podium.
Yeah, just like you said, we came back to council with their direction. They wanted some maps. So I brought you back some maps along with what those businesses would be included in that 1,000 foot range versus what it had been. And then also some additional documentation from when Manitowoc went through exactly that. And I guess the litigation that they had looked up and used for reference, and that said that there had to be over 5%, and there was belief that it had to be over 2% of available land for that usage. In this case, I had engineering look into it, and just the Woodland Industrial Park alone is 7% approximately of the city available.
Okay, so it looks like it meets the requirements that we have to go ahead and move this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. All right, looking for a motion on this.
Make a motion to waive the reading and adopt the ordinance.
All right, thank you, Tracy. Seconded by Jeff. Council discussion. Seeing none, Amanda, roll call vote.
Darla Leclerc,
Aye.
Tim Petrie, Bonnie Shimalunas,
Aye.
Scott Steckmesser,
Aye.
Adam Husky,
Aye.
Jeff Delkey,
Aye.
Tracy Coach,
Aye.
Bill Leclerc.
Aye. All right, thank you for that. On to B, which is an ordinance amending section 9-2-5 of the municipal code entitled Loud and Unnecessary Noises. Recommended action, motion to waive reading and adopt the ordinance. This relates back to the meeting we just had last week at our work session. Chief.
Correct. In that meeting, a couple of things. I had made note that I wasn't necessarily looking to change the ordinance. However, if the council felt it reasonable to do so, that I asked for some consistency. I think everybody was in agreement with that. I will say that in looking forward with those, you'll see, I think the third one down is actually sidewalk cafes too, which I found would have been again, inconsistent. So I look to make all three of them that I'm suggesting tonight consistent with what we agreed upon on that day. In essence, that would move everything to sound hours from Sunday through Thursday, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and then Friday and Saturday, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. In addition, one thing that I did note was an error on page 2 of that ordinance for noise was in the decibel levels. Obviously, we made those same changes there, and the nighttime should actually be 11 o'clock to 6 a.m. Friday and Saturday on that bottom portion instead of what it states. And then moving ahead to page 3 of that, we also agreed that we should make the vibration portion of that the same time period. So those adjustments were made, as well as, even though we were already doing that in our investigation, that violations of that subsection shall require the verification of an officer and an identified complainant.
Okay, and then is that the same on 221 with the nighttime 10 till Thursday 11 to 6 instead of 7 in the bracket?
Yeah, it listed in the vibrations
Okay.
portion, the same time period.
So even though it
that'll be
says 7, it'll be 6.
Yeah, so that'll be consistent all the way through.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you for that. Looking for a motion to adopt this.
Make that motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Second by Tim. Council discussion. See none. Roll call vote. Amanda.
Tim Petrie. Bonnie Shimeludis.
Aye.
Scott Steckmeister.
Aye.
Adam Mahusky.
Aye.
Jeff Delkey.
Aye.
Tracy Coach. Bill Leclerc.
Aye.
Darla Leclerc.
Aye.
All right, thank you for that. There it is. Well, that a little goofy. On to C, ordinance amending section 6-1-19 of the municipal code entitles beer gardens regulated to modify hours when amplified music or sound is permitted to make consistent with provisions of noise ordinance in section 9-2-5. Recommended action, motion to waive reading and adopt the ordinance. Chief, anything further on that?
No, just like you said, this would regard amplified sound or music in that beer garden. And again, looking to prohibit the music between the hours of 10 and 6, Sunday through Thursday, and 11 to 6, Friday and Saturday. And then basically it just says also that the noise should not exceed those standards in that earlier mentioned loud noise ordinance.
Okay. Looking for a motion on this.
Make that
Scott?
motion.
Thank you very much. Seconded by Tracy. Council discussion.
If
C.
I could, Council
Oh, yes.
President, just adding also that does add in there that the hours of operation of the said beer garden too is also at those same time frames.
Okay, so that would extend those hours.
Correct, because it used to have a different.
Yep, used to have different hours. Yep. All right, roll call vote. Amanda.
Bonnie Shimeludis. Scott Steckmeister. Adam Mahusky.
Aye.
Jeff Delkey.
Aye.
Tracy Coach. Bill Leclerc. Darla Leclerc. Tim Petrie.
Chief, you're a busy man. On to D, ordinance amending section 6-10-5 of the municipal code entitled Sidewalk Cafe Permits. Recommended action, motion to waive reading and adopt the ordinance. And once again, Chief Minor.
Again, when looking at this wasn't necessarily discussed, but I went back and looked just to see what the hours were, and in maintaining consistency, this is the one that actually had 6 a.m. because when this proposal came up and we were designing this, the idea was that if you had a sidewalk cafe, people may want to have, say, the mimosa or the Bloody Mary early at 6 o'clock in the morning. So with that being said, that's why I changed the other hours to be consistent with this one. And then added the Sunday through Thursday And then Friday and Saturday change on here.
All right, looking for a motion to accept that.
I'll make that
Bill?
motion.
Thank you, Bill. Second by Jeff. So you got that, Bill and Jeff. Council discussion. See none. Once again, roll call, Amanda.
Scott Steckmeister.
Aye.
Adam Mahusky.
Aye.
Jeff Delkey. Tracy Coach. Bill Leclerc.
Aye.
Darla Leclerc.
Aye.
Tim Petrie. Bonnie Shimulis.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Chief. And I did send you an email on that, the one we talked about in council communications with the parking issues.
Yes, I received it. It's been forwarded to my staff. Thank you.
Yep. All right, on to E, which is an ordinance for direct annexation request for property located at 2423 County Road O, Town of Two Rivers, submitted by Edward Zemuth, owner. Recommended action, motion to waive reading and adopt the ordinance. Greg?
Okay, this again is a direct annexation ordinance. This is at the request of the property owner who wishes to have his property annexed into the city. The various provisions of the ordinance include, as you note, Section 1, that the property as identified in Exhibit A is annexed in. It becomes part of the city under Section 2 for any and all purposes provided by law. The property would be classified for zoning purposes as R1 single family resident. And Jack, I meant to ask you about this today. I know this provision in the statute that the council may designate an interim zoning. So that provision is in here, but and Elizabeth and I have a chance to talk Friday when I sent the agenda out, but the next agenda item provides for setting a public hearing on what I'd call permanent zoning. So I think it used to be things automatically came in as R1, but the statute now reads that the council can set interim zoning.
Yeah, it should be considered an interim step. You certainly do need, in order to create permanent zoning, so to speak, subject to any further changes in the zoning code, you have to go through the process of notice and holding a public hearing. So I think that's appropriate.
This is designating R1 as the interim zoning, but next item on the agenda, we've got you setting a hearing to set the regular, or dare I say, permanent zoning. And per a section of the state statute that got passed a few years ago, the city agrees to pay the town of Two Rivers for 5 years an amount equal to the property taxes that the town levied on the annexed territory as shown by the tax roll for the town in the year in which this annexation is final. So there's kind of a departure fee that gets paid to the town that the property is coming out of. Wasn't our idea, but the legislature thought that was a good idea.
Was basically in return for amending the statute to preclude towns from objecting to certain annexations.
Okay, thank you. And then there's direction to the city clerk as far as distribution of certified copies of the ordinance. So with the recommendation of the Plan Commission and staff would ask for council approval. And we will welcome this new property owner, Mr. Zemuth, into the city.
All right, so this is looking for a recommendation or a motion on this. And again, this is for the interim, as we need to set that public hearing for it to be long-term, I guess. Looking for a motion on that?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Scott. Second by Tim. Council discussion. See none, roll call, Amanda.
Adam Mahusky.
Aye.
Jeff Delkey.
Aye.
Tracy Coach. Bill Leclerc. Darla Leclerc.
Aye.
Tim Petrie. Bonnie Shimulis.
Aye.
Scott Steckmeister.
Aye.
All right, on to F, a request for R1 zoning for direct annexation property located at 2423 County Road O, Town of Two Rivers, submitted by Edward Zemuth, owner. Recommended action is a motion to set public hearing on Monday, December 4th, 2023 at 6 p.m. We pretty much just talked about this. We'll just go right for a motion. Looking for a motion on this.
I'll make the motion.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Second by Tim. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. On to G, waiver of ordinances 7-1-5 parking in parks and 7-1-6 parking or park closing hours to allow overnight camping in Neshoto Park for carnival owners / operators for Beach Bash, June 25th through the 30th, 2024. The recommended action is a motion to authorize overnight parking for 3 campers on the dates requested in parking areas to be designated by the Park and Recreation Director. I also think there was a memo sent out on that as well in a separate email. If you got that, perfect. Yes, or it was even
That's-
on our desks today. Okay, perfect.
Both ways.
I did the recommended action, so, would you want to speak to that, Mike?
Yeah, so Beach Bash has requested that the company that actually brings in the carnival rides could camp near their carnival equipment so they can be very close. They bring in equipments, they're there to monitor the rides and all those good things. I don't see a problem with it. Shouldn't be a slippery slope. I don't think it's a very unique kind of situation with this type of carnival going on. It's a nice thought to be able to put them over at Walsh Field, have a fence around them, a little bit away from the busy, crowded type of areas. What I didn't put in there, I suppose they could use parking within the parking lots that they're already renting, but that probably wouldn't be super good for you guys anyways. So yeah, Walsh Field I think would be a nice solution there.
Or if they want to be closer, the permission we're asking from the council is simply that at the rec director's discretion, they can be in a parking area. I think the original request was like the turf area at Walsh Field. I don't know that we want to set that precedent. Frankly, discussions with the event organizer, and I expect Adam will recuse himself on this anyway. There really isn't room for 3 RVs or campers in the areas reserved for the event. But hey, there's parking spaces on Zlatnik Drive or the little pods of gravel parking areas along Pierce. It'll happen somewhere.
All right, as stated, I will recuse myself from voting on this being part of the event. Looking for a motion on this.
Make the motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Seconded by Tim. Thank you. Council discussion. See none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you very much. On to H, which is consideration of whether to participate in or opt out of class action settlements related to PFAS in drinking water sources from aqueous film forming foams. Report from city attorney. It looks like there's a settlement involving DuPont de Numerous Inc. and others. Settlement also involving 3M Company, and I assume Jack will be here to speak on that.
Yes, I'll try to explain what's going on. It won't be easy, unfortunately. There were 2 class action suits brought, as indicated, one against DuPont, the other against 3M. The parties arrived at a settlement in each, subject to approval by the court, which has not yet been given. In the case of 3M, the settlement payment amount, in other words, the amount that will be available to members of the class, is between 10.5 billion and 12.5 billion. In the case of DuPont, the money available will be approximately 1.2 billion. The members of the class that are eligible to participate in the settlement are basically, in effect, all public water systems with some exclusions. For example, doesn't include public water systems owned by the state, and some specific ones identified in the DuPont action. I believe our public water system utility would be an eligible claimant, in other words, one of a class. What the settlements provide, basically, when we speak of opting out, eligible public water utilities systems may opt out, in other words, elect not to be covered by the settlement, and thereby they would receive nothing as a result of either settlement, but neither would they release claims against 3M and DuPont and its affiliated entities. there is a time period in which that must be done. If you fail to opt out within that period, then you are going to be deemed acquiescing to the settlement, and you're going to be basically part of the settlement class and will not be able to bring individual claims as a result. Those deadlines are, in the case of DuPont, December 4th, 2023. In the case of 3M, December 11th, 2023. So if a decision is made to opt out, you have to file those requests to be excluded within those deadline dates. These settlements address a relatively small area of liability. They don't purport to release 3M or DuPont of all potential liability which may arise out of PFAS. PFAS, as you may know, they're called forever chemicals. In effect, it is believed, at least at this time, that they're always going to be there. And that there you have the seriousness of what we're dealing with here. But the release would only release water supplier claims for treatment and costs related to the effort being done to clean your water so it's free of PFAS. It wouldn't include claims, for example, with respect to groundwater or real estate contamination, things of that nature. We're basically talking about drinking water. Other claims would be reserved, in other words, but we would be, and anyone who participates in the settlement would release DuPont and 3M for claims related to water treatment and remediation costs as to the water sources currently contaminated by PFAS. The interesting things about these is that you have to affirmatively exclude yourself from the settlement. You can't just do nothing. If you do nothing, then you're going to be part of the settlement. And in order to receive any kind of a monetary benefit, you have to file claims forms with the court's appointed claim administrator, who will, according to the settlement agreements, determine the amount due to each utility based on the amount of PFAS discovered and based on the amount of flow involved. So it's not possible to determine accurately what the amount of settlement you'd receive, but information is provided by the courts which allow you to form an estimate based on the amount of contamination and the amount of flow involved. And I forwarded to Andrew and to Greg earlier today that formula for making the determination. I'm advised that we've done testing for PFAS already in the past. And what the settlement states is members of the class considered phase 1 claimants have done that if they had the testing done basically before June of 2023. It's June 22nd, I think, in the case of DuPont, and June 14th or something like that with respect to 3M. If testing hasn't been done, establishing the presence of PFAS, then according to the settlement, you have to do testing now in order to qualify. And there's a specific kind of testing that you have to do. My understanding is we won't be required to do that because we have information, but
This is all pretty late breaking. I
We
think,
have
Andrew, fair to
testing.
say we've done 2 rounds. Are we still waiting on the results of the 3rd round of testing?
We did 3 rounds, we're waiting on 4.
Okay, beg your pardon. Okay. Okay.
I don't know if I'm.
We have an issue, a
If we-
lot of people are gonna have an
If we
issue.
have used testing methods approved by the state or federal government, that's supposed to be adequate to qualify you to be a claimant. If we didn't have that sort of testing, there's a specific kind of testing that has to be performed, which may not be what the state and the federal government have recommended or required in the past. No deadlines have been set as of yet with respect to filing of claims. That will all depend on whether the courts give final approval to the settlement in each case. Then you have a given period of time, 60 days from what they call the effective date. In other words, the date of court approval, final order approving the settlement, in order to get your claim forms in. Claim forms are available on the web and may be used. And certainly that's something that we can review with Andrew and make certain that we provide the information the claims administrator is going to need. What I know about this is based on my review of the very extensive documentation available on the internet, but also on a webinar that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities sponsored, given by a law firm which represents 20 municipalities in Wisconsin with respect to these settlements, and they hold themselves out as available to provide assistance in terms of making claims and generally functioning to answer questions any one of us might have. They indicate that they feel that it would be wise for municipalities to participate in the settlement rather than opting out, because bringing your own claims against creators or generators of PFAS would be extremely expensive. You'd have to prove up your case. You'd have to prove up damages. You'd have to win in court. This way, you can, so they say, have the benefit of the negotiations and the proof that's been submitted so far in the courts. I think a lot of our determination may depend on just what we can estimate we'd receive under the general guidelines we have for making that determination, the formula that they provided. But we won't really know for certain until such time as the claims administrator makes that decision based on all the information the administrator receives, and I assume based on the number of participants within the class. The bringers of the class action suits, of course, will be getting kind of a premium for having fought the good fight, so to speak, and the attorney's fees will be paid. That will all be taken off the top. And that essentially, I guess, in a nutshell, is what we're dealing with here. Again, I think we can make our best effort at coming up with an amount and find out just what we're qualified for approximately by going through the formula based on a level of PFAS and flow as best we can. We submit that information to the claim administrator, and I guess we see what comes out of the claims administrator's office. I don't like class action settlements where you basically have to opt out. Otherwise, you're going to be sucked into them. But I frankly have no idea what it would cost for the city to make its own efforts. And given the fact that this these settlements relate basically only to particular kinds of claims which would be released. In other words, costs of treating the water in an effort to get rid of these forever chemicals. And does not relate to other potential claims. We would then reserve the right to proceed with other claims if we have to. I'm not sure what level of PFAs we're dealing with here. That would be a consideration as well. But inclination, I guess, is if we can get a significant chunk of money to help out in terms of remediating, it may well be a good idea to participate and file the necessary documents to make a claim rather than opting out. If we opt out, though, we have to do it before those deadlines.
I think the scary thing is PFAS is relatively new. Within the last probably couple of years or so is when it at least started hitting our news cycle, or we started being aware of it as a council. And you don't know what that could lead to the future and what other kind of damages that they're kind of releasing themselves from. And should a lot of people opt out in the future, could there be another class action lawsuit that could cover you for a lot more damages that we're not even aware of?
I'd have to say that's possible. Yeah.
And I think that's the scary part about opting into something and then finding out in a couple of years from now, what did we do? I mean, I guess there's no right answer probably to this one, but that would be my concern, is that I don't know that there's a lot of information out there, and there's probably more to come in the next couple of years. We'll probably learn a heck of a lot more about it. And
It could well be the case. And I don't know how many other manufacturers have generated these forever
too.
chemicals.
But they didn't
And,
relinquish
whether
themselves,
3M
I guess,
yeah, whether 3M or DuPont, we don't know what kind of money they'd have left if there were successful
True.
suits on them either. So it's a very difficult question. Unfortunately, we have to make a decision whether to opt out in the next month or so.
I don't recall, Jack, how does that, as far as the format for that return notice, is that certified snail mail, or is there the ability to
Well, there's a way,
electronically
those
file?
are available on the internet. You can file with the
Okay.
claims administrator using the system they've set up for
Okay.
on
So-
the internet.
Yeah, we certainly will have a follow-up report on the next regular meeting agenda. Certainly would want action not later than the meeting on the 27th of November. That's cutting it close. We'll see where we are. This has all been pretty late breaking. The league just did their,
Don't give you much time really to.
no, they don't want to give
react.
you much time.
I don't want to, yeah, right.
So, and I don't know if it's out there yet, but I understand the league was going to be making a recording
It
of
is
the
available
webinar.
on their website. Thanks for reminding me.
Yep.
As are the slides of the Monopoly Firm's presentation, and also links to the court documents in each lawsuit with the settlement agreements and preliminary approval by the court. So you can, those links are available on the league's website. They're very helpful.
This is pretty much by way of information only, so if anyone has any questions for Jack, because as Greg indicated, we're gonna have to do some kind of action, not tonight, but by the end of the month, to either get in this or get out of it successfully. So if there's no question even yet tonight, feel free to reach out to Jack or Greg via email. But if you got something tonight that you want to talk about, feel free to ask them. I'm not seeing that, so feel free to reach out to Jack with any questions you may have before the meeting, or even when we have the meeting to vote on to go with it or opt out of it. On to I, which is a consideration of tax incremental financing, cash grant, and developers performance agreement pertaining to West River Lofts LLC residential development project to replace agreement approved on July 5th, 2023. The recommended action is a motion to authorize the city manager and city clerk to sign the agreement on behalf of the city. Elizabeth looks like she may be on her way up. Not sure who's leading this one.
Elizabeth has a report. I guess I just going into this offer the comments, and there's a fairly, there's some cover memo from myself along with a copy of the proposed modified development agreement. Council, of course, has seen this before, this project before, and did have votes in June and July to approve an initial agreement, and then amended that agreement to provide for easements for redevelopment by the city of the Riverwalk that for years we've called the Eggers Riverwalk along this property, and added provision for payment in lieu of taxes, not in the original agreement. Now we have, as a result of that July amendment, payment in lieu of taxes that would extend out at least 20 years beyond the end of the TIF district in question if the property ever became tax exempt. There have been some other matters, though, that the developer and their finance team have needed to see changed in the agreement. That's why we're back here tonight. The project has every single one of the benefits that were identified when this was initially approved by the council. It, in some ways, what we're bringing you has some additional clarity and benefits that are to the city's side of the ledger in this. So with that, I will turn it over to Elizabeth to walk through some slides we have to share with you.
Thank you, Greg. As Greg mentioned, we have had some iterations of the agreement before council previous to tonight. So having said that, I'm just going to summarize again what this project is about and what the benefits are with this project to the city and the residents and hopefully new folks who will be coming to live here should this go forward. So our first slide for you tonight is just to orient you again as to what this project entails. So this slide does show that the proposed location for the new building on a vacant spot of the West River Loft location. So the orientation is that the building is to the north of 13th Street. The access will be through 14th, and on the west side is Madison Street. So that's what this slide shows with this aerial. And of course, the CN Trestle Bridge is in the West Twin River. Okay, next slide, please, Greg. And this project does offer new construction, which we have not seen in a while of this magnitude within the city of Two Rivers. And I believe that it will be, again, kind of a domino effect that we've already seen on a smaller scale within the city. And this will be in a larger scale of 54 new units. And the breakdown of these units are 4 one-bedroom, 18 two-bedroom units, 18 three-bedroom units, and 14 four-bedroom units. So they will be able to accommodate smaller families and larger families. This proposal also has a trail amenity, which is very attractive for those who will be living there. But also, as we will walk through a bit tonight, there will be the easement that we already have on this property and going forward to be an option with this new development. And of course, there are the waterfront views because this is on the West Twin River. Next slide, please, Greg. Something that was new in one of our previous meetings that we were discussing with the developer was the city's ability to acquire what we're calling the triangle piece. And you can see that the blue line does point to that area and that lines, but that is the area and see the Trestle Bridge. And the city was able to pretty quickly get an LGU exemption from the DNR. Gives us the ability as a city to be any sort of contamination that might exist there under the land, and then give us of course, the access piece of the trail, which does loop around the property. And then of course, whatever the city has planned into the future, which you all are aware that we have been discussing as a community, getting the CN right all the way through the community beyond this parcel, acquiring the CN railroad throughout the community, and then having this beautiful trestle bridge, whatever those plans might be into the future, being right there within the visual area, the Bridge itself right there off of this property. So being able to secure that triangle piece for no cost to the city, and us being able to get it with the LGU exemption was the appropriate way to approach that acquisition. And again, the next slide, Greg, just shows some of the views from the property to the Trestle Bridge itself.
If I could too,
Sure, of
one
course.
thing as far as a change with what's in front of you. In the first agreement, as amended, the city had sought, and the agreement contained a full easement to use that triangle. But then we also wanted the ability, if at a point in the future, the city wished to buy the property for $1 or essentially no consideration, the ability to do that. As the developer engaged in discussions with their financiers and came back to us, they said, look, we don't need this for our development. We're fine with the city acquiring it. But frankly, and the financing is not simple for these housing projects. We don't want to have mortgages executed and the project site identified as the totality of this site, and then have to come back at a later time and say, we need permission from our lenders to carve off this piece the city wants. It would just be far simpler to know if you could buy it now. We said, well, part of that's going to depend on getting this reassurance from DNR in the form of confirming we qualify for the LGU exemption. Elizabeth got right on that, and honestly, we had very good turnaround from the brownfields folks that we deal with. They responded in far less than the time they're allowed for the process, so we do have that in hand, and Elizabeth already spoke to it, but whether that triangle gets developed simply for improved waterfront access, whether it's a way to ultimately develop a trail over that trestle if it could be saved, or whether it makes a mighty handy place from which to dismantle that trestle if it ever has to be removed from the river. The railroad doesn't own property that we can identify at either end of the bridge. And the city has expressed a serious interest in acquiring that. This would be an important piece in making that happen. So just a little added
Great.
commentary.
No,
there.
and the next slide just shows some pictures of the trestle.
Yep.
So it just has many opportunities here, as Greg alluded to, and just the visual component that we all know and already appreciate in the city as an addition. But if we go to the next slide, I will just kind of touch on the project investments, the level of which are something we haven't seen in terms of projects for housing within the city at this point. Okay, thank you. So
And
the,
that increases every time we see
Correct.
new numbers, because it was 14.2 million, I believe, in the
initial,
exhibits.
right.
Yeah.
So the package that they've shared with us is that the developer, but this includes the tax credits and the private investors, is up at 16.7 million. What the city is contributing with our TIF is 500,000 in the form of pay-as-you-go. The additional housing affordability TIF dollars that have been set aside over time with closing TIF number 4, we are contributing $100,000. So the total is 17.3 million for the investment on a current vacant parcel within the city that is also a brownfield site. So this investment to develop a site that has been contaminated because of former manufacturing on the western portion is a significant investment for the city of Two Rivers to bring housing that we don't currently have.
And the development does have all of the necessary DNR clearances for construction to commence from DNR standpoint, looking at the brownfield aspects.
So they do have that in hand. So
Yep.
they're ready to go with the, which is a great segue to the next slide, please, Greg. The project start date, which this is something that is going to be put before for you all in terms of one of the changes. They have requested to move it to December 22nd of 2023 with a completion date of May 30th, 2025. And the small attachment here on that side is a CSM, a certified survey map, which does show the breaking out of the parcel and into different lots, which we will be talking about, but just to orient you a little bit, obviously along the water are, which is where the trail is, which will be broken out into phases, phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 is immediately adjacent to the proposed future building location. The triangle piece is now on the south, the way this is, I'm saying south, but there's an arrow down there, so just let's ignore that just for a moment.
Assume south is bottom.
Yeah, let's just do it that way. And so the parking will be to the north of this. It is going to be split out into 2 parcels to get all the required parking spaces for the development. And then the building that it currently exists will be on to the north as well, on the left side of this picture as shown. And if we could go to the next slide, please, Greg. We are going to, and I'm going to probably stop here actually at this slide to turn it back over to you as how you want to present
Sure.
the recommended approvals with conditions as to what our ask is of you all tonight for the development agreement. These include some of the modifications that are needed. Just as we have asked previously, just some changes to the text with the agreement that you have in your packets tonight. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Greg, to see how you want to move forward with that part.
Sure.
Okay?
Based on, if you want to stay handy
Yeah,
there,
I'm gonna
that's
stay
great. Thank you. Project commencement deadline, and this was just pointed out today. We were moving it back to December 1, but the developer asked if, in light of their closing schedule, it could be December 22. Quite honestly, if it doesn't happen by that date, that would be a default condition. So I don't see the 22nd as a problem as long as they can get started by the 22nd of December. There was also a request that came from, I think, some of the financing people through the attorneys for West River Lofts today, that while we define available tax increment, and I'm going from memory, but in this agreement, available tax increment is what's available from tax increment generated by this development in this district, minus, new property taxes minus any requirement, any of the city's needs for debt service on a borrowing of $350,000 for shoreline improvement. So there has to be increment. Whose needs are met first? The city's needs with paying off debt service on infrastructure related to phase 1 of that easement. Only then is the remaining available tax increment available to apply to the city's obligation under the pay-as-you-go grant. What we kind of took for granted and didn't define in the agreement is what is tax increment to begin with before you figure available tax increment. Again, that was a request we got today. I would suggest simply deferring to the city attorney. Statute's pretty well defined what tax increment is, taking into account base value and the value at any point in time. So those are 2 changes. We would ask that the council approve this as well, with the understanding that we're going to be receiving from the developer proposed collateral assignment of development agreement that would permit the West River Lofts, which as we understand it is getting bridge financing from a bank to cover the city's $500,000 pay-as-you-go grant. Remember, this one has a 6.5% interest rate on it. So they're turning to a bank and saying, you know, what's the pledge to repay this $500,000 worth of borrowing? It's our development agreement with the city of Two Rivers. The city would, Jack can speak to this better than I can, but the city would need to consent to the borrower actually assigning its interest in the agreement. They're asking for that up front.
It's an assignment of the agreement in whole, including obviously any kind of payments made by the city as security for the lender being paid for the amount it's loaning to West River Lofts. The assignment would be right to payment, basically the right to step in and take action that West River Lofts is required to take under the agreement. And there's also a right to enter into a substantially similar agreement with the city on its own. That's essentially what the collateral assignment is about. Searching the internet, I found collateral assignments provided for in other development agreements affiliated with TIF financing. So apparently it is something that is at least done in certain circumstances. But we just learned of this provision today, so.
Wouldn't change the requirements of the development agreement
No,
that the developer has to live up to, but it would give their lender the ability to step in their stead
Yeah.
in terms of pursuing any actions under the development agreement.
I took a quick look at their proposed assignment. I was contemplating requesting some changes, at least to the extent of providing that West River Lofts would not be released from obligations under the agreement, but would continue to be obligated under the development agreement with their lender jointly and severally liable.
So what's the point? Because I'm not following. I don't know if anyone else is or not,
On the
but
collateral assignment,
yeah.
basically what it is they're lending money here. It's similar to a mortgage or other security interest to provide some sort of assurance that they would be paid back on their loan to West River Lofts. In order to do that, West River Lofts is agreeing that if they default in their loan agreement with their lender, the lender would be entitled to payments being made by the city under the
So instead of
development
paying West River Loss, we pay the bank? Is that
Essentially, yeah,
correct?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But the bank's ability to, if you will, demand those payments would still be subject to the same conditions that must be met by West River Lofts
yeah.
as developer. Yeah. It's like, I guess as I view it, West River Lofts says, this is great, we've got a revenue stream we anticipate coming from the city, but we need the capital now. And so they're effectively,
Guess it's similar when
Pledging.
you're a debtor and you're taking out a loan. You have accounts receivable or notes payable to you, and the lender says, okay, well, you're gonna assign us as you default. We're entitled to payment.
just as a reminder, it's entirely a pay-go grant, so there's no obligation to make a payment unless there's increment generated sufficient to make that payment after first deducting $33,000 a year allowance for city debt service. This only applies to the pay-go grant. It doesn't apply to the $100,000 affordable housing grant.
Correct. If I could, I mean, it sounds really complicated and it is, but I mean, it's to bridge the $500,000 that we're not giving them up front.
Right, but now that the bank's in the picture, so if this project fails is my question, I guess now. If the project somehow fails and they essentially don't go forward maybe in a year or two after it's built and they're not taking residents, the bank wants to get rid of it, we're still paying the bank
No,
Only be
because
paid-
the bank kind of upfronted them.
You gotta meet the responsibility.
if they get-
Right, but this sounds to
Bank is
me,
gonna Assume that the bank is gonna assume they're borrowing $500,000. These guys are gonna have to pay interest on it. But the bank's gonna get the money from us instead of the West River Lot guys.
right, so then if they essentially, they could close the doors and the bank would still be getting that money.
No, the bank has to finish.
No, the project is finished.
Oh, yeah,
The bank is still getting the money because
get the money.
they're getting the money from us, even though the development agreement, I guess, is kind of broke. Because they wouldn't be up and operational.
if there's any and Jack, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's any reason the city could, under this agreement, deny payment to West River Lofts LLC, that same reason would apply to our obligation to make a payment to the bank.
Yeah.
that
we,
correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
if there's a default in our agreement, that's West River Law, they step into the shoes of West River Law if there's a default in their loan agreement. So our agreement is defaulted, then we have no obligation to make payments.
To the bank or to West River Lofts. Okay.
That would be the idea.
Okay, that's what I'm
Again,
asking. I was just trying to see if this was kind of a loop around that, to make sure that
I know
okay,
what you.
yep, thank you.
It's basically, sometimes you put a mortgage on personal property. Sometimes you pledge a revenue stream that's coming in from some other source. Not quite a parallel, but you hear about lockbox arrangements that some lenders say, we'll loan you money, but we want to make sure we have the ability to get around you as the person that owes us money and the person it's coming from. This would effectively do that.
Certainly I spec the collateral assignment just to make sure that they're not trying to achieve something like that, but that would be very unusual.
I would never recommend the
No.
council not to do it, but remember, there's an annual appropriation clause in here too that does make the annual
Oh,
payments
that's true.
subject to appropriation by the council now. And we've included those typically because otherwise it counts as geo debt of the city if there's that absolute guarantee. But if you have a valid agreement and a developer that's following it, you would never want to fail to appropriate that money.
Right.
Because our reputation and the
Be
development.
down the
community would be
drain,
mined.
correct.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yep, nope.
We'd also ask for authorization for staff to review and make changes to the final certified survey maps provided as exhibits, so they're in a form acceptable to the city. Going back to the map Elizabeth referenced, the West River Lofts purchased from Bright Horizons, Steve Shenian's entity, what is presently identified as Lot 2 of an existing CSM. They're looking at further dividing that into Lot 3, which I'm going to call the apartment development site. Lot 2, the parking lot, which will be under separate ownership by Scott Crawford Financial LLC. But we have indicated we'll have to see an easement allowing for full use of that area for the apartments because this project can only go forward if it's in conformity with city zoning. And they need to have at least 81 parking spaces for that development on a parcel within, I believe it's 350 feet of the parent parcel where the development is. So, and why the separate ownership? I'm not to get too deep in the weeds, but we understand there were some questions from the financing community about, well, do we really want to own this property with the deteriorated seawall and walkway along it long-term without the assurance, and the city can't offer the assurance. If you read the agreement, we talk about making reasonable efforts to secure funding for that phase 2, but we're not intending to be absolutely positively obligated come hell or high water to improve that piece of private property. So that, I think, is the basic reason for that. So, and of course, while I'm talking about the redivision of the property, Lot 4, the roughly half an acre triangular parcel shown at the bottom of the drawing is that parcel that would be conveyed to the city. And that's with no commitment for providing title insurance, quit claim from the seller. But Jack,
Warranties of title.
no warranties. I don't know how long you spent with it, but I know you had a chance to look at the title commitment from
Was
First
able to look
American.
at it quickly. Nothing jumped out
Okay.
as problematic, but I'll want to look at it again.
Very good. Sorry, I just wanted to skip back to that. So we want to see those certified survey maps in final form appropriate. And I think these, and similarly, those certified survey maps are exhibits to the 2 easements that are on the agenda tonight. So that's kind of a duplicate reference. And I would, I would add to that something that's been on many motions here, and I thought I typed it in tonight on this, but then I didn't save it, I guess, to authorize additional changes to the development agreement as are deemed appropriate and not contrary to the city's best interests by both the city attorney and the city manager. Not looking at things of substance, but things come up like this thing today, well-defined tax increment. So would ask for that. And we can run through those in summary fashion if you wish before considering a motion. I know that there was not a unanimous vote on this the first go around. I would just emphasize some of the things again that we show in the slides. It's a long vacant piece of industrial property. It's not doing any good except for, we've been using it as a snow dump for public works on the river for years. It is a brownfield site, but this investment would address that. Housing, it's 54 units of new housing for the community. Yes, a good number of them income qualified, some of them market rate. It's part of an overall package. We're not just pursuing affordable housing, working with developers. We expect to have the folks from the Confluence here in 2 weeks talking about the status of their project and what they need changed in their development agreement. You know, we are continuing to work on new single family with council's commitment, at least to the design work for single family. But there's a need in this community. We hear about the condition of some of the housing that is available as rentals for lower income families, and some of it isn't all that good, and there are things we should be doing on the code enforcement front there. There's also a matter of providing some decent rental housing for those folks. We do commit in the agreement to, and it's shown in the budget for next year, to spend $400,000 next year on improving the Riverwalk in the phase 1 area of the easement. That's a public improvement the community has enjoyed since the early 80s, and it's in deplorable shape right now. It's an embarrassment. What does this bring to the table? Well, it at least brings to the table enough to pay out of this TID the phase 1 improvements. Phase 2, we're not sure. And the commitment here is not a hard and fast commitment, but one that the city will take reasonable measures to pursue funding. Now, whether that's state or federal grant monies, or whether that's working with the developer who's shown some interest in acquiring the building that is on Lot 1. If this TIF district starts generating more revenue, that can be applied to phase 2. If phase 2 doesn't happen, and we can save, I guess, much discussion of that until we get into the easement agreement, then the city is not obligated to spend any money on that phase 2 area. The developer can put a fence around it to preclude private or public access, and the provision is in that easement only if the city gives notice, 60 days notice, we plan to start making improvements to this easement area. Only at that point in time does that fence have to come down if it's been erected by the owner. So that's kind of a quick summary, but we're optimistic that this project, which we hope to see begin late summer and didn't, can still happen and be breaking ground by the end of December.
You look to consider changes on that survey map and or such, the last 2 bullet points that you had, I would assume those are all made prior to them starting construction,
Yes.
not after.
They would be made prior to our signing the agreement.
Okay.
That's my recommendation. They be made prior to our signing the agreement. Because we need to see that. We need to see that the land division is in conformity agreement, and that the layout is in conformity with what the Plan Commission approved for their site plan. For example, there's to be off the end of
Okay, looking for a motion on this.
So moved.
Thank you, Darla. Second by Bill. Council discussion. See none. Roll call vote. Oh, go ahead. I didn't see your hand.
Just thinking. Now, obviously, if they're borrowing money from the bank, we have to have a contract with the bank for paying them back. Or, I mean, they're gonna.
I'm sorry, that would be part of the motion. The conditions we had identified, plus authorizing the city manager and city clerk to enter into this collateral assignment. What was that? Collateral assignment of development agreement. Again, the bank wouldn't be signing off on this overall development agreement, but on this separate document. Does the bank sign that? I know the city would have to consent to it.
City consents to it, and the
West River
bank and
Law.
West River Laws enter into the assignment agreement.
If you're talking about that assignment agreement we mentioned earlier.
Any other discussion?
I would just, again, council, I know long way on the to changes aren't detrimental to the city's best interests, and we need to push this over the finish line.
Roll call vote, Amanda.
Darla Leclerc,
Aye.
Tim Petrie, Bonnie Shimalunas,
No.
Scott Steckmeister,
Aye.
Adam Mahusky,
No.
Jeff Delkey,
No.
Tracy Coach,
Aye.
Bill Leclerc.
Aye.
All right, thank you for that. On to J. It is a consideration of easement agreement related to public shoreline access and shoreline and public trail improvements in conjunction with West River Lofts residential redevelopment project. Looks like there's two of them. It's an agreement between the two, agreement with West River Lofts LLC and an agreement with Scott Crawford Financial Incorporated. Recommended action is motion to authorize the city manager and city clerk to sign the agreements on behalf of the city. Are those agreements pertaining to each other? So is it an agreement between West River Lofts and Scott Crawford?
No.
Or is that
Actually-
between the city?
These are each agreements between the city and a property owner. One with West River Lofts related to what's I called out on the maps we're looking at as the Phase 1 area. The other with Scott Crawford Financial Inc. I'm sorry, I said LLC earlier, it's an Inc. As it relates to the Phase 2. So I don't think there's any cross references there, Jack. And actually, the city is a signatory to each. There's a different private property owner identified as a signatory to each. And I don't see us signing these until probably the day of their closing, which is when that property will be divided. So while the development agreement we expect would be signed before that, and there was a deadline in that document of November 30, we wouldn't be signing these until there are in fact two separate owners of those two parcels that are identified there as Lot 2 and Lot 3, if that's answering the question. So, and they're different because the Phase 1 agreement, which is the one in front of you now with West River Lofts LLC, does, among other things, present a hard and fast commitment by the city to invest funds in upgrading, to the extent the city deems necessary, the Phase 1 shoreline or seawall, as well as restoring and improving the trail. We've got a $400,000 budget item in the budget. I think the development agreement we just left identified debt service on $350,000 in borrowing, but we've bumped the cost estimate up to $400,000. And that is based on discussion and review by the city engineer with an area marine contractor, the folks at McMullen and Pitts. So maybe more than you asked for, but Phase 1 is city needs to get that shoreline and that public walkway within the easement area upgraded by the end of 2024. And we need to maintain that easement for at least 19 years after 17, I'm sorry, after the effective date of the agreement. That way the lenders and investors know that we aren't walking away from maintenance of that public infrastructure. And once it's fixed, that infrastructure should be in good shape for a long time. Phase 2, we're simply saying the city wishes to have an easement where that existing trail is. We will make reasonable efforts. I think that was the key adjective we settled on, reasonable efforts to obtain funding for it, but there are no guarantees. That easement could only be canceled by the city 19 years out, but we have 17 years out, but we have no obligation to develop the improvements unless we are successful through reasonable efforts in securing the money. So the
Phase 2, basically, we have to elect to proceed with the improvements in order to be obligated to make up.
Jack sent some clarifying language even this afternoon, making clear that that applies to any city liability for what happens within that easement, and it applies to the language in there that talks about the city carrying liability insurance. That's only when it's in use as a public trail after proper notice by the city that we're going ahead with development of that trail. So I'm sorry, going back, what's in front of you first on the agenda is the easement agreement relative to what's called out on the map as the phase 1 area.
So we're taking these in two separate, or is this one altogether? Because I only have it as one on the agenda.
Okay, you can certainly feel free to act on both in one motion, either way.
It is, you're right.
Yeah, we
That is how
have
it's
to, because
set up.
that's how it's called
Yeah,
out.
unless you would like to do it
No.
separately. But
Once is enough.
Okay, I'm sorry, yes, the recommended action has the action singular. I think the way the agenda is prepared, if the council wished to vote separately on them, you could.
We are the grantee, is that correct?
Correct. We understand the second agreement just got handed out tonight, so, and Jack, I think, has done a pretty good job of it already, but if you need any further assurance about the city not having liability for that shoreline until such time as we would invoke our rights under the easement, he can speak further to that. And we only, we included this unrecorded easement that was between the city and Eggers back in, my goodness, 1986. Not that it really has bearing on the current situation, but I think for the public, it's important to recognize, hey, this isn't something new we're doing just driven by this development. That's that so-called Eggers Riverwalk that the city, through lack of investment, has let deteriorate pretty badly in recent years. And I expect some of you have heard about that as well. I know I have. So it's a kind of a historic piece. Again, this approval would be recommended contingent upon finalizing the map that is provided to make sure that the temporary construction easement and the trail easement comport are approved by city staff. And as I mentioned on the earlier one, asking for authorization for further modifications of the easement agreement as both the city attorney and city manager deem to be contrary to the city's best. There's some wordsmithing that. That I'll be quiet and direct any questions to Jack or Elizabeth. I honestly expect the private owner will shortly after closing fence off that easement area just to, limit liability. By the way, I don't know if any. Concept for public walkway. Bridge, from this trail. The access now is only that walkway along the far west end of the, it'd be at the top of the drawing. That's only 6 feet wide because that's all the room there is left once the park, in light of the parking lot. If you've ever walked down there, it's just a narrow corridor with chain link fence on either side. That's about all you can fit with the existing parking lot configuration. So I just throw out. Addison Street Bridge also was built with the idea that a walkway could continue underneath it, but we have no ownership or easement rights anywhere upstream of the bridge. Jack, I know I've blathered it, but I'll ask just for the record and clarity. With regard to the easement with Scott Crawford Financial, Inc., if the city doesn't give written notice of an intent to proceed with the walkway improvements, what are our obligations or liabilities?
I don't think we have any obligations.
That's the answer I was looking for. And do understand, the agreement with West River Lofts, that obligation to upgrade the shoreline. Yes, it includes their frontage, but it also includes the frontage that the city will be acquiring.
Did everyone get a good chance to read it over? Yep, okay. Then I will look for a motion. Thank you, Bill. Seconded by Darla. I think that's just reverse of the last one. Perfect. Council discussion.
Just to make clear, half approved. By staff, I mean city engineer, community development director, city manager, and city. On those funds. And provision that the city attorney, there can be further changes to the agreements based on the determination by the city attorney.
Any council discussion? Tim?
So Bright Horizons already owns lot 1
Yes.
and they want to acquire the rest? And they're
No, actually, I believe the survey needs to be changed. This was based off the base survey where Bright Horizons, which is Mr. Shenian's entity, sold the property to West River Lofts. Is that correct, Matt? Ultimately, the land division that needs to be finalized is the land that's owned by West River Lofts, divided into 3 parcels.
And nothing will be done with lot 1?
Nothing done with lot 1 at this time. We're aware of conversations about a possible acquisition for development, but nothing, there is no agreement in place
There's
at
like
this
3 or
point.
4 different businesses in there now.
Yeah. And part of the Plan Commission site plan approval is seeing that there is an easement parcel. I get it straight. Lot 1 and lot 2 that addresses access needs for both parcels. And we, as a staff, have worked with the survey. Frankly, a building permit wouldn't be issued without that information in place.
Lot 2 is parking area, lot 3.
Yes.
For me, I don't like a lot of things under number 4, but I don't know that we do all that stuff all that well in other parts of our city, and kind of being forced to do it for this one section of the city that's benefiting more of the grantor than it is the grantee when it comes to the under letter C.
Or C, as far as trail maintenance activities.
Right.
Well, again, sweep.
I mean, we do the best we can, but on limited resources, I don't know that we sweep all of our trails throughout the summer. And we know about garbage pickup. We know about lighting. And here we're gonna be required to maintain everything. Well, some things in other parts of our park system, trail system, kind of get let go. And then we're gonna make sure that we're making this top notch.
Well,
I'm not saying we don't make
Yeah.
best efforts to get it
Right.
done, but here we have an agreement that tells us we're going to. So if the priority would, if you got two of them and you got limited resources, this one gets done and maybe others don't. Because this is a written document that says we need to maintain it, and our other trail systems don't have that same document.
The others, for the most part, are an obligation to ourselves because the city.
They are, but they can be put on the back burner and sometimes are.
Right.
I mean, you can point to debacled lighting at Neshoto Park for as long as it went on. As just a recent example where we can let that go, but this one we can't.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, I don't disagree with that. And I would just point out though, sweeping the trail should be swept periodically to remove any dirt or other debris. That doesn't say if it's weekly, if it's monthly. Our high use trails like Mariners Trail
Is
in the summer
done,
is
right.
weekly. Yeah.
Right, but then I would say, what about the other trails? Are they done throughout the summer? The one, if you go into Washington Park or if you go into the library park, are those done periodically? Are they done once a year? Are we sweeping this trail more often because we have to now and letting other ones go? I'm just, I think it's a fair question
I hear what
because
you're
we do
saying.
have limited resources. Now we're gonna have to focus more of them on that. Are we letting other things go?
Well, and I would just point out, I think we identified, and I crafted this part of it, I think what we thought were some pretty basic services: sweeping, trash pickup, any trash receptacles placed by the grantee along the trail should be regularly emptied and maintained in good
Which they
condition.
should, and I think we have some
Yeah.
along there anyway right now, I
And
do
then-
believe.
How else to put this? I sure as hope we do a better job taking care of it than we have in recent years. I'll grant you that. But it doesn't say we have to put trash cans there.
No, I think we have some currently there, though, I do believe.
Benches are pretty dreadful, and I can vouch for that. Lighting, any lighting installed, we do have existing lighting, but that's non-operable.
No.
Yeah. Fencing and site furnishing, again, any fencing and site furnishings within it will be maintained in a safe condition and good repair. We'd be hard pressed as a city to say we're gonna do otherwise. Do we fall down sometimes, like, strap swings break on play equipment? that
That's
kind of thing?
routine maintenance, that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I was more pointing out stuff that's been a problem for a couple of years versus something that just happened within due time.
Duly noted, our thought was these are fairly general and not highly specific or without very real specific performance. That's a fair.
Any other council discussion? See none, roll call vote, Amanda.
Tim Petrie,
Aye.
Bonnie Shimalunas,
No.
Scott Steckmeister,
Aye.
Adam Husky.
No.
Jeff Delkey.
No.
Tracy Coach,
Aye.
Bill Leclerc,
Aye.
Darla Leclerc.
Aye.
All right, thank you for that, good discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have for information only, Greg?
I'm sorry, yeah, let me look at that.
Do you have it handy, or you want me to go over it?
No, I did have a couple of comments on it.
Okay.
Again, the next regular council meeting on November 20, I do expect we'll hear from either at the 20th or the 27th from Kip Golden of the Confluence LLC with a status report on that important development. Of course, you'd kind of expect City Hall is closed on Thursday, the 23rd, and like much of the public sector, Friday, the 24th. Leicester Public Library closed on Thursday, but open on Friday and Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend in the interest of great service to the reading public. Council work session on the 27th, inclusive of that budget hearing we talked about. We may very well have the Two Rivers Family Swim Center folks here. Mike, is our follow-up meeting, you and me and that group scheduled yet, or we're waiting to schedule?
It's tentatively confirmed.
Okay, very good. And I'm assuming nobody would have any real problems if there was no December work session meeting
Not
squeezed
at
in
all.
between Christmas and New Year's.
Not at all.
We can, if you have extra cookies, you can just leave them here at City Hall. So
I'm
that's
sure
all
you'll
I
put them
have.
to good use, huh?
No closed session tonight, and got a lot done. Thank you.
All right, looking for a motion
I'll
to
make that
adjourn.
motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Second by Tim. Council discussion? None. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you and good night.